Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
Mayhem Mountain. Written by C.K. Walker. Performed by Geoff Clement. In 2 miles, take exit 19 for Valley Park Drive South. Siri chirped from my sister's phone. Charlotte, turn that off. I know where I'm going. You sure about that? I mean, it has been a couple of decades, Mark. Please. Like I could ever forget where Adventure Valley is. Come on, we spent every summer of... There it is! I swerved briefly into the oncoming lane as Charlotte thrust her arm in front of my face to point excitedly out the window. There's Adventure Valley! Oh my god, what ride is that? That coaster. It was called Steel something, right? No, wait, that's Mayhem Mountain, isn't it? I gently pushed my sister's arm out of my face and back over to her seat. I couldn't fault her for her excitement, being that it was taking an awful lot of effort to control my own giddiness. It felt like we were kids again, yelling and bouncing in the back seat of my parents' car as the first shining rails and wooden planks of the park's roller coasters came into view above the treetops. That's the Steel Viper, I told her. Mayhem Mountain's on the other end of the park, and that wooden roller coaster over there is the Excalibur. Oh yeah, I remember those. I was always too much of a wuss to ride the Viper, but I rode the crap out of the Excalibur. Well, Charlotte, you're an adult now. I think it's time to take on the Viper. As long as the contractors have tested it and given it the okay, I'm in. That was really the question, wasn't it? We didn't know which rides had been inspected and cleared and which ones hadn't. I sent up a silent prayer that Mayhem Mountain was counted among the rides that had. I'd left Brandon several voicemails asking about it since he was the one in charge of everything. But with how fast things had been moving since we'd bought the park, I couldn't fault him for being a busy man. If you'd told 12-year-old me that my crazy, hyper, wild-eyed friend Brandon Decker would end up graduating cum laude from Northwestern Business School, I would have laughed in your face. Brandon? No way. Tyler, maybe, but never Brandon. In fact, half the reason I think he chose a business designation was because of Adventure Valley. When the park had closed in 1989, Brandon had gathered us all together in his basement, and, with a gravitas and solemnity I've never seen in him before or since, asked us to make the pact. At the time, the promise had been the most serious vow that 5 12-year-olds could ever make. High off an entire summer of Adventure Valley fun, we agreed, with all the ceremony of a meeting of Parliament, that we would one day come together and buy Adventure Valley Amusement Park. Of course, back then, our plan had been to buy it and just ride the roller coasters into the ground. We decided which friends from school we would let in, and which enemies would be barred from the gates. It had always been our park, and it was only right that we should have it. It had taken 20 years, but we eventually did fulfill our promise. With a hell of a lot of pushing from Brandon, and a sizable offer of collateral from Tyler, the bank had agreed to give us a multi-million-dollar loan to buy, repair, refurbish, and reopen the park. The size of the loan for which the 6 of us were now responsible had given me nightmares for several weeks. How would this place ever turn a profit? It had been closed decades ago after operating in the red for several years. The county had experienced a high number of runaways and missing persons in the area in the last years of the 1980s. The entire region had been on edge as the cases mounted and people in the area became depressed and suspicious of each other. It had absolutely killed park attendance. But seeing the first cresting waves of roller coaster rails through the trees made me all but forget about my financial worries. This was Adventure Valley, for God's sake. If we opened the gates, people would come. There! That's our exit! Charlotte squeaked. I pulled off the interstate and took a left under the bridge. Less than a mile later, we came upon the park's acres of parking lots to our right. We turned in and drove all the way up to the front near the gates where several other cars were parked. A Lexus, a Mini Cooper, an old Chevelle, and a Honda Civic, another rental car like ours. "Looks like we're the last ones here," Charlotte said. She was right. As we pulled up next to the Lexus, I noticed a group of people standing next to the ticket booth, waving to us excitedly. "Oh my God, is that Tyler? Wow, he's lost some weight. He's so skinny now. And Brandon's losing his hair. Whoa, is that Koji? Koji got hot." Calm down, Paris Hilton. These guys are my friends. They're off limits to you, same rules as when we were teenagers. Besides, half of them are married. Really? Which half? I raised an eyebrow at Charlotte and shook my head in amused bewilderment. My little sister never had outgrown her boy craziness. "Wait, who's that?" Charlotte asked as we got out of the car. "What? That's Scott. You know Scott." "Not Scott. Scott looks exactly the same. The girl next to Scott." "Oh." I'd put this off so long that I'd actually forgotten to tell my sister at all. "That's Danny, Scott's girlfriend." "Danny? As in Danielle Bircher?" "Well, yeah." My sister gave me such a horrified look that you'd think I'd betrayed her to the death. But it was fleeting and quickly replaced by a sly smile. "Fine by me. I'm sure she's not the same person she was in high school. We're all adults now, right? Now come on, let's go." A sigh of relief escaped my chest as I slammed the car door and followed Charlotte over to the entrance. Though I saw most of these guys every year, seeing us all here together, standing at the ticket booths of Adventure Valley, brought me a sort of happiness I hadn't experienced in many years. Mark Lantis, I can't believe it. Tyler had an edgy, commanding voice that probably made his many employees shudder and scatter, but I knew him like a brother, so his bravado just made me laugh. "Can you believe it?" I asked as I gave him a hug and a slap on the back. "Back at the front gates. $15 a day doesn't seem so ridiculous now." "Pfft, $15 a day my ass," Brandon said as he shook my hand. "By my math, it looks like we'll be charging about $65 a day." "I'll pay it," Charlotte smiled as she gave Koji a hug. "Are people really going to pay $65 a day?" Koji asked. "Even Disneyland only charges $85, and there you get access to 2 parks. "How could I forget?" Brandon shook his head. "One of our investors works for the mouse. Pity they won't let you design any artwork for this place." "Come on, man, I'm not an artist. I'm an engineer." "Don't you mean Imagineer?" Charlotte winked at him. Koji sighed and shook his head. "Yeah, I do." As Brandon and Charlotte teased Koji, I made my way over to the side of the ticket booth where Scott and his girlfriend were conversing. I didn't know why Scott was being so standoffish, but I thought it might have something to do with the investment. Scott, the least well-off of the 6 of us, worked at his dad's collision shop and hadn't had a whole lot of money to invest. I thought maybe he was embarrassed about the money, but now, watching him lean against the booth with slowly shifting eyes, I realized it wasn't that at all. Scott was just stoned. Same old Scott. "What's up, Burnout, my brother? I haven't seen you in like 15 years. How about a bro hug?" "Hey, how's it going, man? Look at you. What's your diet, man? Rabbit food and lettuce? You're not gonna get any ladies with that skinny body." "Your mom doesn't seem to mind." "Hey, Mark. I'm Danny. Do you remember me? Danny Bircher?" Scott's girlfriend gave me a shy smile and stuck out her hand so we could engage in a stiff handshake. "Yeah, I think so. You were in my sister's class, right? Charlotte Lantis?" Danny had the decency to look embarrassed. "Yeah, but we weren't really friends." That's putting it lightly, I thought. "We were freshmen when you guys were seniors," she added. "Yep, I do remember that. Maybe I should just get it over with." I called Charlotte over, and the reintroduction of the 2 girls, while awkward, was over pretty quickly, to everyone's relief. We were all eager to get into the park. It was odd not stopping at the window for tickets, and even odder to walk around the rusting turnstiles of the front gates. I delighted in reminding myself that we owned this place now. Brandon gave us a tour of the park. Not so much of the geography, we all knew that inside and out, but of his vision of the hypothetical layout and reorganization of Adventure Valley. The Excalibur is going to need the most work, according to Rich, our head contractor. A roller coaster made of wood exposed to the elements for all these years. We'll keep as much of the original structure as is safe, but we might have to rebuild most of it. Do we have the money for that? Scott asked loudly from where he walked behind us with Danny. Yeah, Tyler said. We have the money for that. Ah, Mr. Moneybags. That mini dealership treating you well? I nudged him hard with my shoulder. Tyler stumbled, but kept enough composure to push me back into a passing churro stall. Those 6 BMW dealerships are treating me very well. Well enough to serve as the sizable collateral we needed, Brandon added. So, Charlotte ran up behind us and threw her arms around Tyler and Koji. Can we ride some rides? Are you kidding? Why do you think we're here? Tyler laughed. I'm just here for Mayhem Mountain, I said, clapping my hands and rubbing them together eagerly. Brandon threw up his hands. All right, fine. I thought you guys would be interested in how your investment is coming along. Koji snorted. All we're interested in is the projected ROI, and more importantly, which rides have passed safety inspection. Oh. Brandon stopped walking and tried to look annoyed, and failing that, he smiled. A little over half of them are rideable. Suddenly, everybody was talking at once. Is Steel Viper on? Yeah, that one's on. What about Snapdragon? That one is good to go too. Renegade Falls? The water's not on. High Roller? Yes. Space Spin? Oh yeah. Power Tower? They're doing the inspection this week. There was only one ride I really cared about. Mine and Brandon's favorite. What about Mayhem Mountain? Hell yes, he answered, to collective groans from the rest. Mayhem Mountain had always been our thing. The others had always been happy to ride High Roller and Snapdragon into exhaustion. Brandon and I always split off toward the end of the day to ride Mayhem Mountain into the twilight hours. Ugh, Charlotte shuddered. I hate that ride. It's boring as hell, Koji agreed. I helped design something similar for Disneyland Hong Kong. It's so tame we put it in Fantasyland. Hey, that ride is awesome. It's long and it goes upside down, I argued. Charlotte is even too scared to ride it. I'm not scared of that ride. It just gives me the creeps. Something about it just seems, I don't know, off. All right, look, we'll start at this end of the park and work our way toward the back. That way we can ride every ride that's passed inspection, including Mayhem Mountain, Brandon said. And Snapdragon, Tyler added, and the others nodded excitedly. Yes, every ride, and of course we can ride them, as many times as we want. Hell yes, brother. Koji high-fived Brandon and we headed down the street towards Space Spin. Our progress through the park was blissfully slow. Everyone wanted to ride every ride multiple times, and one person always had to stay in the loading area to operate the ride. It only took an hour or two to forget that I was a fully grown 35-year-old man. Being back here, running through the lineways with my friends, arguing who got the first row of the first car, it was like being 12 years old again. Still, my eye was constantly drawn up over the buildings into the distance, to the back of the park, where the high, gleaming rails of Mayhem Mountain shone in the unobscured sunlight. There would be no arguing who got front row on that coaster. It was me and Brandon. It was always me and Brandon. Charlotte, Tyler, and Koji were the most like children, constantly running ahead and arguing over which ride to go on next, yelling back to ask Brandon if this one or that one had been cleared by the contractors. Brandon and I hung back from the group a bit, discussing ideas and possible improvements for the park. Scott and Danny brought up the rear of the group, quietly talking and lighting joints. When we arrived at the Enterprise, a simple ride that consisted of spinning cars on a circular track, I offered to flip the switch while the rest of the group rode to excess. The Enterprise always made me sick when we were kids. Brandon offered to stay on the platform with me to chat, while everyone else rode the ride. I flipped the switch to turn the ride on, and as the car spun away from the loading area, the Enterprise's signage came into view. I sighed. All day I'd been trying to ignore the bright graffiti sprayed all over the park, but the words painted over the signage for the Enterprise were impossible to ignore. Where did the missing kids go? And the rest of the graffiti in the park was much the same. Most said things like, "Where are they?" "Runaway Row," "Find Ryan Kinski," and "The missing are now dead." Similar sayings could be found in towns sprayed across a few dilapidated buildings in the industrial district. Brandon's eyes avoided the sign, but I could tell he was thinking about it too. "Do you think the reason they shut this park down, do you see that being an issue for park attendants?" I asked as casually as I could. Brandon was quiet for a few moments as he waited for the ride to slow to a stop so he could flip the switch again. "Nah, I don't think so. Low attendance issues aren't really what shut this park down." "They aren't?" This surprised me. "No. When we were negotiating the sale of the park, I was given access to the park's financials in the 80s. "So they weren't operating at a loss?" "Oh, they were. But this park has operated in the red since opening day in the 70s. Half of their revenue was being fed back into something called county services, whatever that is. The bank couldn't tell me, and believe me, I tried to find out." "County services?" I mused. "Yeah, bizarre. And according to the paperwork, the park was closed because the owner didn't want to live here anymore. And he couldn't be bothered to wait for a decent offer on the property, so he just sold it to the bank for next to nothing. So he was a rich guy," I leaned back against the railing to stretch my back, "and an idiot." "Yes, to an extreme in both cases. The owner of the park was Abel Bisset." "Abel Bisset? Related to that French billionaire, I'm guessing?" Brandon nodded. "Michael Bisset. He built this park for his son in the 70s. Abel was never really what we would call business inclined. I've always heard him described as simple." "I can't believe the son of a billionaire lives in this area." "Well, not anymore. He moved on decades ago." I shook my head in disbelief. Who would have ever thought that our simple little park was owned by a famous billionaire's son? Hell, I might have even sat next to him on rides and never had any idea. "You guys want to go again?" Brandon yelled to the others as the ride came to a stop. "I'm ready to move on," Koji yelled back. "Anybody want to ride again?" "Nope," a chorus of voices replied. It was near 5 o'clock when we finally arrived at Mayhem Mountain. As the sun began to set, a familiar panic and urgency welled in the pit of my stomach. It took a moment for me to realize that we didn't have to leave when the park closed this time, because the park didn't close. We could stay until sunup if we wanted to. As I eagerly approached the turnstile for Mayhem Mountain, Tyler spoke up behind me. "Listen, can we run into town and grab something to eat before we ride Mayhem?" "You really want to ride Mayhem after we eat?" asked Koji. "Good point." "There's only one loop." Danny rolled her eyes. "Two," I said. "Don't forget the inline roll." "Yep, 2, Scott answered. "Plus it's a 2-minute ride. If your food isn't sitting well, you've got a long wait till it's over." "Look," I said, "let's ride it a couple of times and then go eat. When we come back, we'll see how we feel." Everyone nodded, and we started walking through the lineways up to the platform. When we reached the loading dock, I was excited to see our favorite green car sitting on the track. "Front seat!" Brandon and I yelled simultaneously as the train cars came into view and everyone behind us groaned. "I'm staying here," Charlotte said. "I'll just work the launch pad thingy." "Still scared after all these years, Char?" Scott teased her. "Shut up, burnout." Scott laughed and tousled her hair before running up and jumping in the first car behind Brandon and I. Danny got in next to him, and then Tyler and Koji took the second car. We pulled the shoulder restraints down, and they locked in place. "Ready?" Charlotte asked. "Yeah," Brandon yelled back. "Send the car through." Charlotte pulled the lever and the brakes disengaged. As the car moved forward, I turned to Brandon. "Did we get the green car on purpose?" I yelled to him as the coaster clacked around the load platform and began the clattery climb up the first lift hill. "Yeah, we sent cars through here all morning, but I made sure Rich knew to leave the green machine in the loading bay." "Awesome!" As the train climbed up the lift hill, I made no attempt to hide my utter glee. I looked out over the expansive park and couldn't believe it was mine. Every track, every car, every turnstile, every screw. From the front gate to the overflow parking lot in the back, it was all ours. How I wished I could go back in time and tell young me waiting in the 2-hour line for Mayhem Mountain, "One day you will own this place." And as we crested the hill and the train fell into the first drop, I realized I essentially had gone back in time. At the very least, I was screaming like a 12-year-old, as was everyone else behind me. We dipped into the first tester hill and then banked up hard to the second lift hill. We dropped from there down into the vertical loop, banked around a set of gift shops, up briefly, and then down a small hill into the inline roll. When we arrived back at the loading bay, we were all screaming and whooping. Charlotte didn't even have to ask, just smiled at us and sent us through again. We went twice more before we finally got off the ride. Koji walked over to check out the control panel while the rest of us taunted my sister. "Are you sure you don't want to go, Char? It's awesome." "Nah, I'm good. I have no problem being the carny for this ride," she laughed. "Come on, Charlotte, just one time. One time and we'll leave you alone," Tyler urged. No way. Not interested. All right, anything else, though? "Hey, do you guys know what Track B is?" Koji asked. "Track B? What do you mean?" Brandon walked over to Koji at the control board and raised an eyebrow. "That's weird." "It's probably just the track they use to get the cars into the storage bay," Scott said with a shrug. "No," Koji said. "That's called a transfer track. Track B has to be something else." "Yeah, well, I've been on this ride enough times to know that there is no other track." "Yep," Tyler agreed. "He has." "So, should we try it?" Brandon tested. No," says Charlotte. "If you don't know what Track B is, that means the contractors don't know about it either, which means it hasn't been inspected in at least 20 years. That's suicide." "Look," Koji said, "if Track B exists, then even the most incompetent of engineers would have found it during an inspection." "And Rich cleared this entire ride," Brandon nodded. "It's probably just the ride in reverse. We're good." "Well, we're in," announced Scott from the other side of the track, though Danny didn't look quite on board with the idea. "Mark?" Tyler asked. "Yeah, I guess I'm in. What's the worst that could happen? We get funneled into a repair bay?" "All right, then I'm in too," Tyler said hesitantly. Koji shrugged. "Here goes nothing." He flipped the switch over to Track B, and a moment later a loud metallic scraping sound some distance away filled the park. The sound lasted almost a minute. I studied the familiar silver roller coaster under the pink sky of the setting sun, but I saw no physical changes to the track. I looked over at Brandon and a shrug of his shoulders told me he didn't either. "Shall we?" Scott asked, gesturing to the train cars from which we'd just disembarked. I gave Charlotte a questioning look, but she emphatically shook her head no. So it was just the 6 of us again. "It's only right you two take the bow of the ship." Tyler gave a mock salute. "Oh, captains, my captains." I laughed and hopped into the right side of the front row. Brandon crawled into the seat next to me. Tyler and Koji got in behind us, and Scott and Danny took the back. We pulled the shoulder bars down, and they locked into place. "Are you sure about this?" Charlotte asked when everyone was settled. Danny said something from her place a few rows back, but all I heard was Brandon yelling, "Pull it!" The brakes released and the train rolled away from the platform and into the twilight of dusk. The lights had lit up on the track while we'd been arguing, and the roller coaster looked absolutely beautiful. I was filled with awe and reverence at what this place truly meant to me and my friends. It was a symbol of our youth and innocence and blissful ignorance of the problems and conflicts of the adult world. It was our own little bubble of happiness. The coaster again climbed the lift hill, and from the top, Brandon and I studied the track, but in those few seconds I saw no difference. Brandon looked over and I shook my head at him disappointedly. By the time we reached the vertical loop halfway through the ride, it was clear that there was no track B. But it was still hard to be upset because I was still on Mayhem Mountain and still found it an impossible challenge not to smile. We banked around the now brightly lit gift shops, up the small tester hill, and then back down the inline roll. Except the inline roll was suddenly above us. We'd missed it. Instead, the track now descended into a large square hole in the ground behind the gift shops, and we were headed directly into it. I was in too much shock to scream or even move. The black hole swallowed us in an instant, and we descended into complete darkness. I felt a comfortable pressure leave my shoulders and realized that the shoulder bars had released. I gripped the front lip of the edge of my seat and heard the terrified screams of my friends behind me as the coaster suddenly spun into what felt like an inline roll. I was too scared to do anything but hold on for dear life, though some part of my brain registered that the G-forces of the roll probably would have been enough to keep me in my seat, even if I had let go. Probably. We came out of the inline roll and dropped again hard. As the roller coaster dropped, the room suddenly lit up around us and I saw the track below arcing up into a light tester hill. As we hit the bottom of the hill, the shoulder bars lowered mechanically. The car went over the small tester hill and then braked to start up another tall lift hill. I took my first breath since dropping through the ground and looked around, tuning out the screams of Danny and Tyler behind me. We were in what can best be described as a cavernous room, which I could only assume from its vastness stretched to the farthest reaches of the park above. There were lots of vertical loops, high drops, and sharp curves that put the track perpendicular to the ground. Throughout the entire sub-level building, lamps dotted the wall every 30 feet. They put out a dreary yellowed glow for as far as the eye could see, but many were burnt out, and in some places, the track disappeared into darkness. In the dull, yellow edges of the light, I saw something that registered in me a horror beyond death. Far away from us, in a section of shadowy track, I saw the high crest of a peak hill which reached almost to the ceiling of the giant room. And then the track just ended. Suddenly I felt the horrible reality of the world outside my mind begin to bleed in. Danny was screaming uncontrollably, Tyler was crying, bawling even, and Koji was yelling at Brandon, who was looking straight at me, hitting my leg hard and repeating my name. As the cars continued to climb, I finally gave him my attention. I didn't want to be alone in the fear anymore. "What is this?" was all I could think of to say. "We have to get off this ride! We have to get off this ride, Mark!" "I know, man! We're going to die!" "I know, man!" I yelled as we reached the top of the lift hill and dropped over the other side. I squeezed my eyes shut until I felt the shoulder bars once again release, and I bit my lip to keep from crying. I opened my eyes and choked as I watched the track ahead of us bend up into a vertical loop. I reached up and tried to pull the shoulder bar down, but it was locked in place. "Hang on! Hang on to the seats!" I yelled as loud as I could. As we approached the loop, I felt the brakes engaging, slowing the car, and I felt a tow cable catch beneath my feet. We were being pulled up through the loop, but too slowly for gravity to keep us in our seats. As the train began to invert, I felt my feet rise from the floor of the car. My hair fell over my face and my butt left the seat. I closed my eyes and tried to block out the screams of terror from behind me. I concentrated on my death grip of the ledge of my seat as we rounded the track. We remained upside down for what felt like an eternity. Finally, the pressure began to ease, my butt dropped back into my seat, and my feet felt the floor. The white noise in my ears subsided, and I was suddenly aware of Koji screaming. "Tyler! Oh my God, he fell out! Oh my God, he fell! He's dead, man! He's dead! He hit the track down there!" Brandon yelled at me, wide-eyed and looking half-crazed. I was finally seeing the Brandon from my youth. The shoulder bars descended again, this time locking in tighter. We came out of the loop and sped up and down several tester hills. I tried to study the track ahead of us as we went through the safer parts. I thought I saw water reflecting off the metal rails somewhere in the distance. Brandon sobbed in his seat. "Mark, what are we gonna do? I don't want to die, man. I don't want to die. I don't know. I don't know what to do. I'm sorry, I'm scared too," I answered him. We banked around a corner of the room and the shoulder bars released again. This time, we dove into a curve that put the left side of the train parallel to the ground, and it was a long drop. I gripped the edge of the seat tightly as before, but this time I kept my eyes open and was able to catch Brandon as he began to slip out of his seat. By the time the train righted itself, I couldn't tell who'd been lost. Most of the screaming behind me had turned into loud sobbing or silence. The shoulder bar didn't re-engage, and I felt the car's brakes slow the train down again. I didn't have to look to know what was coming next. It was another inverted loop. This one was tall and large, and I could tell we'd be upside down for longer. Someone behind me began screaming again. Danny, I think, as I tried to take measured breaths and position my hurting hands back under the lip of the seat. Brandon did the same and looked over at me as the car started up the loop with tears streaming down his face. "I don't want to die in here, man." I shook my head back at him because I could think of nothing to say. I felt tears leave my own eyes as we reached the tipping point of the loop and my feet again left the floor. Before we were even completely upside down, I felt my back begin to slip down the seat. I thought, if I lost my grip, I could try to grab for the shoulder bars when I fell out of the car. The car suddenly stopped, and I opened my eyes to see we were completely inverted. I grunted loudly at the pain and immense effort it was taking to keep my grip on the seat. The car started to move again slowly, and I heard Brandon say something to me. I looked over at him, just before he slid out of the car. 1 second he was there beside me, and the next, he was falling away from the car. I saw Brandon try to grab the shoulder bar on the way out, but he couldn't keep his grip on it. I watched him fall, and I saw him break his back on the track below, and he stopped moving. I stared down at him as the car continued to move slowly around the loop, and he stared back up at me, dead or dying. By the time the car hit him on the way out of the loop, he was completely gone. The shoulder bars re-engaged, and we went through a dreadfully long period where nothing happened. We were secured in our seats by the restraints as the coaster spent what felt like several minutes racing over hills, banks, curves, even an inline roll. Without the adrenaline pumping through my veins, I felt the shock begin to wear off. It was replaced by a panic and fear unlike I'd ever experienced, and I decided that was the point of this section of track, to build and facilitate an unbearable fear. At long last, I felt the brakes engage, and I looked ahead to find the loop we were surely entering, but there was none. We were high, almost to the top of the ceiling, and we slowed to a stop on a straightaway. Directly ahead was a drop, and at the bottom of the hill, a series of 4 different tracks with a transfer stack just before they split off. Each track had 5 or so feet of color, red, orange, green, and blue, before racing off in different directions. I felt an urgent shaking of my shoulder and turned around to hear what Koji was saying. "Which track are we connected to?" I looked at the transfer stack. Green! Where does Green go? It was hard to hear him over the sound of Danny's sobbing from the second car. I tried to trace the green track through the building, constantly losing it and finding it again. I wasn't sure, but it seemed to end at the lift hill I'd seen earlier. The hill with no track at the top. It ends at that hill! I yelled back at him and pointed. Danny cried louder. Oh no. While we were stopped, I rubbed my hurting hands together. As I looked down at them, I noticed something new in the car. At some point, a small, blinking panel had flipped over in the wall at the front of the car. It had 4 colored buttons and an old analog timer. The timer was so old and damaged that though the numbers were clearly changing, I couldn't see how long we had. We get to choose, I said, and explained what I was looking at. Can you see which track ends where? Koji asked. I followed each of the tracks as best I could, but the rails circled and slid in between each other. It was hard to tell which track went where. I think the blue track ends in that big pool in the corner. The red track ends in a wall, and the orange one just drops into a hole in the floor like the one we came down here through, I think. There's no way out, dude, said Scott from the second car. His voice was unsettlingly calm. They're just telling us how we're gonna die. We can still find a way out of this, I answered quietly, speaking more to myself than to him. Choose the pool, Scott said, and I could hear the tears in his voice. I've heard drowning isn't an awful death. I've heard it's calming at the end. No, choose the hole in the floor, said Koji. It's possible it drops down into another cavern like this. There might be more track, which means more time to figure out how to live. You don't think we'd be the first to choose that option, do you? Scott asked him. And no one that went missing ever came back. There's just more death in that hole. I don't want to die like this, Koji begged. And at least it's a chance. Danny was still whimpering in the back and offered no suggestion. It seemed the decision was up to me, and I had to make it fast. I knew I didn't want to die by dropping off the track. I didn't want to drown. Perhaps the quickest death was the wall. More than likely, we would all be killed instantly. Less suffering. Less time to think about our fates. But the truth was, I wasn't entirely positive which track ended where. It was all educated guesswork, and my time was up. The orange! Let's go down to the second floor, if there is one. Scott and Danny said nothing, and Koji choked out the last words I'd ever hear him say. Push it, before it chooses for us. Before I could think about it any longer, I pushed the orange button and committed us to whatever death it promised. We heard the metallic scraping of the track transferring below. Once the orange track was securely connected, the brakes on the car released and the train rolled slowly toward the drop. Danny started screaming again. As we dropped down the hill, I got a better view of the orange track. There was a vertical loop ahead that didn't look as high as the others we'd been through. In fact, it looked like there was a chance the fall wouldn't kill us, if it wasn't an optical illusion, and if the shoulder bars disengaged for that loop, we might have a shot at living through this. I yelled back to everyone behind me. Let yourself fall out of the loop! The one up there! No one responded to me, which didn't matter because I didn't think I'd have the courage to let go of the seat anyway. We raced along the track, in and out of banks and curves, and at one point we passed along the pool and I looked down. Below the water's surface, the track ended above an even deeper pool. I could see the shadows of several coaster cars at the very bottom. I suddenly felt the brakes engage, and I realized we were coming to the loop. I tested the shoulder bar by pushing up on it, but it stayed locked. I was momentarily relieved to think I wouldn't have to make the decision to fall out now or gamble on the orange track. But suddenly, the restraints released. As we started up the loop, I gripped the lip of the seat tightly and turned my head back to look down. It looked like we were very high, and I only hoped the ground was the loosely packed dirt that it looked like. I had to choose right then, the fall or the hole. I chose the fall. As I began to slide up the seat, I yelled at the others to let go and fall out of the car, and then I closed my eyes and let go. I felt my head crack the shoulder bar on the way out. It wasn't like a slow motion fall. It was over before I realized that I'd actually let go. One moment, I felt an intense pain as my head hit the bar, and in the same moment, I realized I was on the ground. I hadn't even had the time to realize the possibility of hitting the track below or getting run over by the cars. I opened my eyes in time to watch the cars speed over the track above me. The pain didn't hit me all at once. I had one long, blissful second before I felt it. And then I was in agony. I'd hoped my body would be so in shock that I wouldn't feel much of the pain, but I felt it all. I concentrated on keeping my eyes open and trying to catalog the damage. There was blood on my clothes, but I didn't know from what part of my body it was coming. I heard screaming as well, but I didn't know if it was in my own head or coming from my friends as they approached the gruesome end. I didn't want to move, didn't think it was safe to move, but I knew I had to, if only to pull out my phone. With trembling fingers, I pulled the thing from my pocket and brought it to my face, trying to focus on the screen, but it was shattered and refused to even turn on. I threw it away from me, and suddenly I became aware of the oppressive silence. Their ride had ended. With Herculean effort, I rolled over onto my stomach and dragged my broken body across the ground to where I thought I remembered seeing the hole. I crawled for what seemed like hours, and maybe it was. Sometimes I tried to stand or even kneel, but the pain in my back and ribs was too great. I passed out several times from shock and pain, but eventually I made it to where the track disappeared into the ground. I pulled myself to the edge and looked down inside the hole. The track ended just below the surface. It was a natural shaft with walls made of rock. I don't know how deep it went, and I didn't want to. It was a fate I'd only narrowly escaped. But then I thought of my friends down there, and ever so fleetingly wondered if maybe someone had survived. "Koji?" My voice echoed loudly down the shaft. No answer. "Scott!" Nothing. I reached for a nearby screw and dropped it down the hole. It took far too long to land, and when it did, it was with a tink as it hit something metallic. The small sound echoed up the shaft and out into the cavernous room, and I realized this place was built with acoustics in mind. I rolled onto my back and studied everything I could see from where I was, staving off my body's desire to pass out again. I felt nothing but numbness when I finally saw what I was looking for. A long, panoramic window in the far wall. I knew then what track B was for, and I finally let myself slip away into the darkness. I remember very little of my rescue. There were lots of people in uniform and my sister yelling, and pain. Lots of pain. I was in and out on the way to the hospital, but I remember I passed through the room behind the window at some point, and from my stretcher, through the chaos, I saw in that room a single chair facing the window. It was covered in a deep layer of dust, I was never visited by anyone official, let alone asked to give a statement. Charlotte stayed by my bedside at the hospital for months while I recovered. She wouldn't say much about that day, although she finally did tell me something. She said that they wouldn't let her ride with me to the hospital, and that someone had offered her a lift. On that drive, she'd been confronted by two people that had convinced her to never speak of what had happened, and had instructed her to convince me of the same. Whatever they threatened her with had her begging me to agree. And I did. At the time. I am still, to this day, relearning to walk without aid. I never saw Mayhem Mountain again. The loan defaulted, and Adventure Alley was bought up by an unknown LLC, which bulldozed it to the ground and built a block of apartments over the top. They're still empty to this day. I don't like the dark anymore. It reminds me of the horror my friends must have experienced as they looked down and saw the track end just before they disappeared into that hole. I try not to think of what they must have felt as they plummeted down the shaft in complete darkness, strapped to a roller coaster, awaiting the terrible end. I wish I'd chosen the pool, if only to save them from that fate. As for the billionaire's son, he was only simple in the fact that he was a man of simple tastes. And he still is. I looked him up once, only a few years ago. He owns several amusement parks now, all sizable, but small enough to be popular only in their specific regions. In fact, one is not very far from where I live now. But then I realized that I probably didn't need to search all the rides in the park to confirm what I already know. Somewhere in that park, some ride, in some corner, has a track B.
Tommy Illman was only 7 years old when his parents bought the house on Tamara Lane. Though it was no mansion by any stretch of the imagination, the 5-bedroom raised ranch-style home seemed like a palace compared to the 1-bedroom studio apartment he and his parents had lived in prior. His dad loved to brag about the size of the new house. He said that it even had a finished basement. "I thought the whole house was finished," Tommy said, confused by the term. His father laughed. "Yes, Tommy," he replied. "The whole house is finished. It just means the basement is set up to use as an activity room or a den or even bedrooms." Tommy gasped. "You mean I have to sleep in the basement?" This idea clearly upset him, and his protest continued until his mother interrupted. "Of course not, sweetie," she assured him in a low, soothing tone. "You can pick which room you want as yours." His eyes lit up. Before he had a chance to respond, he was cut off by his dad. "Except the master bedroom." Tommy let out a disapproving humph. He hated that his father always seemed to know what he was thinking. He figured that was just one of the perks of being a grown-up. As they stepped through the front door, Tommy squealed with delight. He dashed off through the living room, into the kitchen and down the main hall to look at the rooms. Though the size of the master bedroom was impressive, he was equally satisfied with the other 2 rooms on the main floor. He returned to the hall and pointed at a door that sat just off the kitchen. "What's that? Is it the basement?" His dad nodded. Tommy turned the knob and slowly opened the door. He was greeted by a wooden staircase that plunged downward into a dark, wide-open room. He turned to his parents. Fear painted across his innocent face. "It's okay, just turn on the light. The switch should be on the left wall. Show me your left." Tommy lifted his left hand slowly. His parents smiled and nodded encouragingly. He slowly slid his hand along the wall until he felt the switch. With a click, the light above the stairs came on, forcing the darkness to retreat. Tommy gave a weak smile, then carefully began to descend the stairs. The basement was much larger than he'd expected, and far less scary with the lights on. The main room was the length of the entire first floor, big enough to run around in or even play a game of tag. Two bedrooms sat against one of the longer walls with a small half-bathroom between them. As Tommy marveled at the size of the basement, he was startled by loud footsteps on the stairs behind him. "I thought the basement was supposed to be finished," his mother said with disappointment in her voice. "The walls are just bare cinder block, and the floor isn't even carpeted. Only the main room needs carpeting. The bedrooms are carpeted and the bathroom is ready to go. And I like the cinder block walls. Gives it a certain vibe," his father responded, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. His mother scoffed. "Yeah, like a dungeon." Tommy laughed. Sure, the concrete floor and gray cinder block walls weren't exactly homey, but the space definitely made up for it. Tommy peeked his head into one of the small rooms. "I like it down here," he said excitedly. "Can this be my room?" His parents looked at him with a mixture of confusion and shock. "Oh, come on," he pleaded. "This room can be my bedroom, and this room can be like a game room," Tommy explained, walking through the adjoining bathroom. "I'm a big boy now, and this way I can make noise and play video games and have friends over and practice karate and—" His parents started chuckling. His mother gave him a comforting smile. Okay. If you really like it, then I guess we can give it a shot. If you change your mind, we can always move you to an upstairs room." Tommy gave his mom and dad a big hug. "Hey," Tommy began as he looked toward the far corner of the main room. "What's that?" He pointed his tiny index finger at a large rebar grate in the floor. His dad walked over to it and peered inside. Looks like an old drainage grate. Bone dry in there now. Must have been used to drain water from the basement during construction before it was flood-proofed. Don't worry, though. Realtor said they sealed it up real good like a submarine. Tommy giggled. He loved submarines and boats. With a thumbs up, his dad reassured him this would be the best room in the house. That first winter was very trying for Tommy and his family. Repeated snowstorms brought over 5 feet of snow and temperatures that dipped well below zero. Of course, these conditions bothered his parents much more than they did him. Even though he couldn't play outside due to the winter advisory that was in effect, the schools were closed, and he got to stay in and play video games with his neighbor and new best friend, Ryan Fisher. He was slightly older than Tommy, and though the age difference was only by a couple of months, Ryan loved to rub it in Tommy's face. However, Tommy didn't pay attention to any of his teasing. In fact, he thought this behavior only showed that even though Ryan was older, he wasn't any more mature. "So, what made your parents buy a haunted house?" Ryan asked, never taking his eyes off the video game they were playing. "What do you mean haunted?" "It's not haunted," Tommy protested, having lived in the supposedly haunted house for several months. Ryan shrugged, eyes still glued to the TV screen. "People say it's haunted. They say the last guy who lived here liked to lure kids down to the basement with candy. Then he would kill them and eat them. They say he killed himself when he heard the police were coming to get him and—" "Boo!" Ryan shouted and lunged at Tommy, causing him to let out a high-pitched yelp and drop his controller. He punched Ryan in the arm and began using words that would surely get him grounded if his mother heard him say them. That night at the dinner table, Tommy decided to break the usual silence with his newfound information. "Ryan says our house is haunted." His parents stopped eating and waited for him to continue. "He says a bad man used to live here, and he ate kids in the basement." Naturally, his parents were mortified at what the neighborhood kids said about their house. "Sweetie," his mom said, placing a hand on his arm, "that's just a scary story the neighborhood kids made up to frighten you. The house isn't haunted, and no one that lived here ate people. Isn't that right, dear?" Tommy's dad nodded in agreement. "That's right. The realtor said the house had been foreclosed after the original owner had passed away." Tommy gasped at the thought of someone dying here. "It's okay, T. The realtor said he was an old man, and it was just his time to go. Nothing to be scared of." Tommy believed his parents, but still, he felt uneasy about the house, especially the basement. "Can I move my room to one of the upstairs rooms?" he asked with a hint of fright in his voice. His parents nodded and told him he could use the guest bed until they moved his things up from the basement. When spring came, the warm weather brought more than the usual birds, flowers, and insects. The enormous snow mounds that had built up over the previous winter had melted into a deluge of water, causing Tommy's entire street to flood. It was then that he and his family found out their finished basement would not live up to its title. One afternoon, as Tommy opened the basement door to get his skateboard and helmet, he found himself staring at several feet of water instead of the bottom of the staircase. The water was dark, smelled of mildew, and appeared thick and viscous. "Dad?" Tommy yelled down the hall. "The basement's flooded!" Tommy's dad came running down the hall. When he saw the swamp that sloshed lazily at the base of the stairs, he unleashed a tirade of swears and curses directed at no one in particular, save maybe the basement itself. Tommy's mom rushed in when she heard the yelling and told her son to go play outside, while they got the situation sorted out. He agreed and quickly hurried out to the yard to play, thankful he had moved his bedroom upstairs when he did. After several days of plumbers, home inspectors, and insurance agents coming and going, coupled with his father yelling at what he called the rat bastard realtor, the basement was finally water-free. The inspector told Tommy's parents the original seal had been a slapdash job, and the new seal should keep the water out for the coming years. Before he left, he cautioned they may experience some mold issues, but to give them a call, and they would send someone out to handle it. They thanked him and the rest of the workers for doing a quick job and hoped that would be the end of it. Not long after the flooding and repairs, Tommy was woken from a sound sleep by a faint scratching noise at his bedroom floor. He quickly snapped on his bedside light and looked all around his room. He was alone, but the scratching sound persisted. He slowly crept out of bed and placed his ear near the heating vent in his carpet. It was then that he realized it wasn't scratching he was hearing. It was whispering. "Tommy." The voice rasped like the sound of dry leaves scraping on pavement. "Tommy, please. Come down here. I want to meet you." Tommy was frozen with terror, but mustered all of his courage to respond. Who are you?" he asked, voice trembling. The whispering returned. "I'm a genie," the voice lied. "I was trapped down here until the water set me free. I have so wanted to meet you and your family. I've listened to you for months, hoping I would be set free so I can grant you wishes." Tommy grabbed his flashlight and made his way down the hall. He carefully approached the basement door. He reached out with his tiny hand, placed it on the knob, and slowly opened the door. As the hinges squealed and groaned, the batteries in his flashlight died. Tommy let out an audible yelp, then quickly cupped his free hand over his mouth. He peered into the inky blackness of the basement, too scared to descend the stairs or even reach out for the light switch on the wall. In the darkness, he swore he saw a shape moving at the base of the stairs. As his eyes adjusted, the shape appeared to be a person, swaying back and forth like a tree caught in a light breeze. Tommy swallowed hard as the shadowy figure lazily lolled from side to side. Then, the unthinkable happened. The shadow took a step. Tommy screamed as the figure moved slowly up to the next step, still swaying side to side. Without warning, the light above him flashed on, and the shadow vanished. "Tommy?" His dad's voice boomed from behind him. Tommy screamed and quickly turned to face him. "What are you doing out of bed, son?" Tommy was taking increasingly deep breaths. He raised his arm and pointed to the bottom of the stairs, not daring to turn and face what might still be lurking below. His father looked past him and gave an exasperated sigh. Tommy turned to see what was wrong and why he wasn't running in terror. On the wall, at the bottom of the stairs, was a large black stain. Ah, great. Just what we needed. His father let out another sigh. Mold. Come on, Tommy, get back to bed. We'll deal with this in the morning. As Tommy followed his father back down the hall, he glanced back, filled with dread. His father didn't see it, but he did. The mold wasn't only on the wall. There were 2 dark stains on the 2 most bottom stairs as well. The next day, Tommy told Ryan what had happened. "Oh, dude, you're full of crap," Ryan exclaimed. "That story I told you is something we all tell the new kid to scare them. There's no ghost or genie or whatever in your basement. The old dude that lived here just croaked." "Don't be such a baby." "But it's true," Tommy argued back. "I can prove it." Tommy walked with Ryan over to the basement and swung the door open. "What do you call that?" Tommy asked, triumphantly pointing at the dark spot on the wall. Mold, you dingus. All the houses have it after the flooding." Tommy pointed his finger at the stairs. What about those footprints? Explain that," Tommy said, challenging his assertions. Ryan shook his head slowly. "Still just mold, dude." Tommy was starting to get angry. His parents hadn't believed his story either, and dismissed the shadowy creature as a nightmare. Ryan flicked on the overhead light and started down the stairs. "Come on, Tommy, let's find this basement genie." Before Tommy could stop him, Ryan had already disappeared into the basement. Tommy quickly caught up to his friend, who was now standing in the far corner near the drainage grate. Ryan gestured at the floor surrounding it. Dark, greenish-black spots encircled the small opening in the surrounding walls. "See, dude? Mold! It sucks, but it's just mold." Before Tommy could argue, the 2 of them were startled by a loud bang. The basement door had swung shut. Tommy ran back to the steps to see if maybe one of his parents had accidentally closed it, not knowing they were down there. But before the word "Mom" could escape his lips, the basement light blew with a sharp pop. "Come on, Tommy. This isn't fun." Ryan's words were cut short by a blood-curdling scream. Tommy squinted in the darkness, too frightened to move from the base of the steps. He stared at the far corner as unimaginable fear washed over him in waves. Even without the light, he could make out the horrible scene that was unfolding before him. The shadowy figure had returned and was wrapped around Ryan. Only this time, it looked far less human than the night before. Numerous limbs, claws, and tendrils groped, slapped, and squeezed his friend until the screaming stopped. Tommy saw the shadows lower his friend's limp body to the floor. "Tommy," the shadows whispered. "I'm still hungry, Tommy." The dark mass shambled toward him, twitching and chuckling. "Will you feed me, Tommy? Will you bring me more food?" Tommy began to sob. He knew that this was the end. He knew this creature would squeeze the life out of him like it did Ryan, and then it would get his parents. He closed his eyes and braced himself. "What the hell are you kids doing down here?" his father yelled from the stairs, flashlight in hand. "Didn't I say it wasn't safe to be down here because of the..." He didn't finish his sentence. Tommy's dad cupped a hand over his mouth as tears began to form in his eyes. Oh my God. Ryan. Tommy, what happened? What did you do? The shadows had retreated once again. Tommy ran to his father and wrapped his arms around him, hot tears stinging his eyes. It was the mold, Dad. It was the mold. The coroner's report had ruled Ryan's death an accident. They said it appeared he had suffocated from an intense allergic reaction from the mold spores in the Illman's basement. They said that situations like this were rare but not unheard of in young children. Ryan's parents, however, did not accept this explanation. Instead, they took their sadness and frustration out on Tommy and his family. This is all his fault! Ryan's mother screamed through tears, pointing an accusatory finger at Tommy. That little bastard did something to him! He's sick! Our whole family is sick! Mr. Fisher tried to calm his wife down, but the same pained, judgmental look lingered on his face. Honey, he began, not here. Not like this. Ryan's closed casket sat just a few feet away on a small white altar, adorned with flowers, stuffed animals, and photos of the now deceased boy. Tommy hid behind his parents and burst into tears, his small voice trembling. It was the mold monster, Mrs. Fisher. Tommy struggled to get the words out. The sudden loss of his new best friend gripped him in fear and anxiety that would not shake loose. Mrs. Fisher approached the Illmans, hatred and pain in her eyes. The only monster is you! Get out! Out! With that, the funeral director approached the Illmans and firmly asked them to leave. After Ryan's funeral, things only got worse for Tommy and his parents. The voices and shadows had stopped, but his fear of their return kept him awake most nights. One evening, when he should have been sleeping, he heard his parents arguing in the living room. Tommy's mother wanted to sell the house and move. We can't stay here, she pleaded. The mold is dangerous and Tommy is terrified. His best friend died down there. His father met her concerns with anger. We can't just leave. We sunk so much money into this goddamn house. Who's gonna want to buy it after a little boy just died here, huh? I had that shit in the basement cleaned best I could, and I filled the damn drainage grate with cement. What more do you want from me? What about our son? She screamed. Don't you give a shit about him? He won't sleep. He barely eats. He won't even go near the basement. He is traumatized. Tommy's dad paced back and forth, hands covering his face. Fine. Fine. Take him to therapy. Get some help. He's obviously all screwed up. I told him not to play in the damn basement. You do whatever you want, but I am not leaving. His mother grabbed her coat and stormed down the hall to Tommy's room. Get up, sweetie, she said, lightly shaking Tommy's shoulder. We're going to stay with Aunt Linda and Uncle Steve. Tommy slipped on his shoes, took his mother's hand, and the two of them drove off into the night. Tommy didn't see much of his father after that fight. He and his mother stayed with his aunt and uncle until they were able to find an affordable townhouse. For the first few years after his parents separated, his father would come and visit a few times a year, but the constant bickering with his ex-wife made his visits less and less frequent. Until one day, they stopped altogether. Tommy attended therapy at the behest of his mother and school guidance counselor to help cope with what he had witnessed in the basement. After years of therapy, he eventually came to terms with Ryan's death being a freak accident caused by severe anaphylactic shock. True, he still had his fears of basements, sewer grates, and mold, but he tried not to let it interfere with his day-to-day life. The visions and voices all seemed to vanish the night he and his mother left the moldy old house. Now 18, Tommy had decided to leave the townhouse he and his mother called home for the past 11 years and rent his own small place in the city. His new apartment was barely bigger than the living room at the townhouse he'd just left, but it was closer to campus, and he could even walk to work if he had to. One evening, as he was just getting in from work, the weather took a terrible turn. Rain had been hammering down for hours, the gutters below Tommy's apartment filled with rushing water and debris. This type of weather always made him anxious. Thunder boomed just above, shaking his windows. He closed his eyes and tried to tell himself it was just a storm. As the noise from the growing storm raged on, his mantra was broken by the sound of his cell phone. The phone jingled to life with a number he did not recognize. Tommy nervously pressed the accept button. "Hello? Tommy speaking?" There was a pause. He heard someone on the other end breathing heavily. "Tommy, it's Dad. I know it's been a long time since we last spoke, but I heard you moved to your own place and were going to college, and I just wanted to see how you were." Tommy sat silent for what felt like an eternity. There were so many things he wanted to say to him, wanted to shout at him. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes. I'm fine, Dad, thanks. Been keeping busy, work, school, you know." He heard his dad chuckle on the other end. It had been so long since he had heard his father's laugh that he forgot how soothing it could be. "You sound so big now, T. I'm sorry I let time get away from me like that. I should have been there for you and I wasn't. I hope I can make it up to you, son. Anyway, I have some news you might like to hear. I know how much you hated that old house after your friend Ryan passed away. Well, I just heard from our old realtor that they tore it down to make way for condos or something like that. Isn't that great?" Tommy felt his heart sink. "Tore it down? Even the basement?" Tommy asked, fear causing the hairs on the back of his neck to prickle. Yeah, even the basement. It's great, right?" Before Tommy could respond, his living room light flickered and went out. The room filled with a wet and rotted odor as the vague shadows began to shift around him. "Dad," Tommy nervously whispered into the receiver. "They let it out. They broke the cement in the grate and they let it out, Dad." His eyes darted around the room, phone still pressed to his ear. The silhouette seemed to dance and weave with every move he made. "Tommy, calm down, okay? We've been over this. There's nothing in that basement that can hurt." His father's words were cut short. He pulled the phone away from his ear. The screen was blank, dark, dead. Panicked, he bolted for the front door. "Tommy! Where are you going, Tommy?" The whispered voice of the shadows asked from just in front of his only means of escape. Something was different this time. This time, the shadows had more than one voice, speaking in unison. Ryan, is that you?" Tommy choked out between stunted breaths. "We're hungry again, Tommy. We haven't eaten in years. You're going to feed us, Tommy. You're going to feed us." The engulfing darkness slithered through the air, wrapping Tommy in their damp embrace. The stench of mold and decay filled his nose. The inky blackness wriggled and squirmed in and out of his mouth. The shadows blanketed his eyes and filled his ears until all fell dark and silent. Tommy's father came bursting through the front door of the small apartment. He knew he hadn't been the best dad, but he had to see what happened to his son. when he heard the panic and fear in his voice. He needed to be sure that everything was going to be okay. But it wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. In the small beam of light that trickled into the apartment from the outside hall, he saw the lifeless form of what used to be his little boy sprawled on the floor. He rushed over and held his son's body in his arms. Silent, weak sobs escaped him as he rocked back and forth, trying to make sense of what could have happened since they last spoke 3 years ago. The door to the apartment slowly creaked shut, extinguishing what little light the hall had offered. A damp, moldy smell crept into the room. Tommy's father began to cough and choke with the noxious odors that now seemed to surround him. He raised his head and peeked over the shoulder of his son's corpse. On the other side of the room, the shadows bobbed and weaved from side to side. The squirming mass of darkness lolled toward him. "Dad, we're hungry."
My Best Customer. Written by Geoff Sturtevant. Performed by Paul J. McSorley. Chapter 1. Orange Oak's Secret Man. Whoever once gave me that compliment, I've never forgotten it. I have forgotten, however, which one of these friendly young ladies gave it to me. After all, there have been quite a few since then. I've also forgotten who first told me how much tail delivery guys get out on the road. But I'll be damned, he was right on the money. I was barely a week into my new career before I ran into my first lonely, horny, home-shopping housewife. I'll tell you, it has to be the world's best-kept secret. Otherwise, every man on earth would be lined up to do this job. It isn't all fun and games, of course. 8 years I've been doing this. The job has its perks, as I've already explained. But the work itself? Well, you can bet whoever called Christmas the most wonderful time of the year was no courier. The trucks aren't loaded with boxes. They're stuffed with them like big cardboard sausages. Looking in the back of an empty truck, it's easy to picture the packages neat and orderly on the shelves, with a nice clear path to walk down the middle. That's rich. In real life, you open the door, and the boxes are stacked like bricks up to the ceiling. We've got our little platitudes for this back at the hub. We say, "Man, you couldn't fit a pube in there," or "Man, you couldn't fart in that truck." But by now, only a week until Christmas, we're so worn out, the shop talk has given way to silence, and we're all just focusing on the finish line. Shit, I've been so busy, I can barely focus on my extracurricular activities. It's the home shopping fanatics that keep our trucks filled to the brim. Most of the lunatics manage to keep their addictions under control from January to November, but come December, all bets are off. 35 Marigold Street is home to one of my most prolific home shoppers, Kelly Dumont. She's got more money than she knows what to do with, a substantial inheritance I hear, and orders more crap than anyone in town. Every day the stuff shows up, gimmicky home and garden stuff, magic knickknacks, lawn gnomes, etc. Plenty of clothes too, but who knows what she does with the clothes. I've never seen her wear anything but the same tattered old nightgown day after day. She's always home, always has the TV on that home shopping channel. She's dead pale, sickly looking, always ripe. And she signs for her packages in these big capital letters with her filthy yellow fingernails. She doesn't talk much, But when she does, you can tell she's a little slow. Her girlfriend's no treat either, a town cop named Sheila, a bulldog of a woman. She's got skin like a newborn rodent, and this mottled, patchy scalp that'll turn your stomach when you see her without her hat on. They make a good couple, though. 500 pounds between the two of them, and about flush in the looks department. There are some lookers in this town, believe me, but Kelly and Sheila are sure not part of that club. The first time I saw Sheila was at the police station. I had a delivery for her there, and I recognized her name from all the stuff I brought to her house. Home shopping crap for Kelly and religious literature stuff for Sheila. So I thought I'd be friendly and let her know I recognized her name. Sheila Stone, I said. 35 Marigold Street, right? Kelly's my best customer. A note: most people are flattered when I recognize their names. It usually serves as an icebreaker. Sometimes we'll even get friendly afterwards. Of course, that's not what I was after with Sheila, and she sure as hell wasn't the type to get friendly with me either. But she wasn't flattered one bit either way. Her face went cold when I said it. Real cold, like a light behind her eyes went black. "What did you say?" she said. "I delivered to your house all the time. I recognized your name." "A north wind bringeth forth rain, and a gossiping tongue bringeth forth anger. So, maybe you should stop pecking your nose around town, fucko." I apologized and told her I'd stop being so nosy. Arguing over proverbs with an angry cop, I figured, would only earn me parking tickets. So it's a week to Christmas, and I've got this enormous box stuffed in my truck for 35 Marigold Street, addressed to Sheila. This'll have to be my very first stop of the day. I won't have any room to sort out my deliveries until it's out of the way. That's the way you do things during the holiday season. Deliver the big boxes first, and I need this one out of the way ASAP. I arrive at 35 Marigold at 9 a.m., and boy, is it cold. The bare branches all seem to be dipped in ice, and they scrape against the roof of my truck as I pull up to the curb. In an hour or two, I know I'll hear the icicles dripping to the pavement like little Christmas chimes all around town. But for now, Orange Oaks is just plain frozen. The easiest way to get rid of a box this big is to back right up to the house so you can yank the box out and push it right up to the garage. So I back down the long driveway, hoping to God that Sheila isn't at home so I can just leave the box at the door and get out of there uninsulted. Unfortunately, I see the garage door is already on its way up. I'm caught. I hop out of the truck, and there she is, Sheila Stone, resplendent in her enormous sweatsuit. My goal here is to keep the awkwardness to a minimum, so I turn on my patented Dave Bender charm. The plan is to ignore the elephant in the room, to pretend the uncomfortable exchange at the police station never happened. "Morning, Ms. Stone," I say. "I'm not used to seeing you in civilian attire." "You got my big box, I hope?" "That's the one," I say. "Biggest box of the day award goes to Sheila Stone." She is clearly unamused by my prattle. I lift the back door and step up onto the bumper to get a grip on the big box. The load shifted, though, and the box is wedged in there pretty good. I pull, but it barely budges. Shit, I was hoping to get this delivery over with as quickly as possible. "Let me handle that," Sheila says. "Get out of there." Have at it, I'm thinking, so I hop out of the truck, prepared to watch her make an ass of herself. But she rubs her fat mitts together, grabs the box, and I'll be damned, yanks it loose. She drags out one end of the long box and sets it on the ground. "Wow," I say, "you're a strong one." "A strong what?" She glares at me. "A woman?" "Well, I'd be surprised to see anyone do it that easily," I say. I'm sure it pleases her on some level to hear that, but she sneers. "Give me a hand putting it inside, huh? Not that I need it." "In the garage?" Yeah, in the garage. We grab opposite ends and she nods toward the house, insisting I go in first. Just let me know when to put it down, I say, and we carry it in. Once I'm back against the wall, she says, right there's good, and I start to lower the box. And just as I'm getting ready to set it down, a nuclear torpedo explodes into my balls. It happens so fast, I don't know what to make of it. Before I know it, I'm clutching my crotch on the cold cement. I'm disoriented. Great, I'm thinking. I have a concussion. And then the daylight is shrinking away behind Sheila's massive silhouette, and the sound of chains are churning overhead. What happened? I'm still struggling to get air. The garage door clanks closed. Sheila is standing over me. So close I can smell her. I think I can smell her socks. She extends a hand. I start to reach for it, but now I see the gun. It takes a moment before I realize what's happening. A sickening, sour pill expands in my stomach. It had been no accident. She had done it to me on purpose. But why? Sorry I dropped your box, I say. It was all I could think to say, my eyes never leaving the gun. Get up. The words don't fully register. None of what's happening makes any sense. Get up, fucko. Don't make me ask again. I don't tolerate non-compliance. Slowly I get to my feet, the dull ache in my groin spreading to my stomach. The barrel of the revolver follows me up. Get your hands up. My hands are already up. But what had I done? Am I being arrested? You've got the wrong guy, I say. I don't know what you think I did, but I'm the wrong man. Every man is the wrong man. Her hand looked to tighten on the gun's grips. Okay, just take it easy. Her face contorts. She swings a fist, knocking a bunch of junk off a nearby storage shelf. Paint cans crash to the floor, one bursting open and leaking a pool of white paint. Look at what you made me do. I ought to blow your balls off. I hadn't done anything. She knows that, doesn't she? That's not what this is about, is it? All right, I say. Sorry. Just don't shoot. You better clean it up before I get mad. Before she gets mad? A voice comes from behind the garage door to the house. Kelly's voice. Daddy? Stay inside, Sheila says. The door creaks open and Kelly peers in. I can't see her face, but I know she sees us. Sheila stomps on the floor. I said stay inside. She shuts the door. Is Kelly in on this? Sheila levels the gun at me. Do I have to ask you again, bucko? I said to clean up your mess. Now do it. She dips the barrel, indicating the spilled paint below. Okay, I say. No problem. Whatever you want. I just need a bucket of water and maybe a sponge and I'll clean it up no problem, okay? She glares at me. First off, don't talk to me like I'm some sort of nut job. Second, I don't have a goddamn bucket. Little dimples form at the corners of her mouth, but only for a moment. Get back down there, she says. I get back on my knees, watching the gun follow me down. Clean it up with your tongue. I look up at her. What makes her think that she can do this? Because she's a cop? Just because she's a cop doesn't mean she can mess with anyone she wants just because they pissed her off one time. This must be a joke, I'm thinking. But I can tell by her face that it isn't. You'll never get away with this, I say. I told you I don't tolerate non-compliance, fucko. She thumbs back the hammer. Now do what I told you. It's paint, I say. I'm stating the obvious, but it also seems obvious that no one should ever be in this position in the first place. See this gun, she says. This is a .22. shoots itty-bitty little bullets. I shoot tight groups at 10 yards at the range. This close, I can put all 6 in you without so much as nicking an artery. Know what that means? She thinks she's goddamn Dirty Harry. If she's bullying me, it's one thing. But is she really crazy enough to... That means I can make you do whatever I want. You're gonna do whatever I tell you eventually. It only depends on how bad you want it to hurt. Now do it. My eyes turn to the spill. It's old paint, coagulated and oily. A strong chemical smell wafts off of it. So what am I supposed to do? I can't entirely shake the idea that this is some kind of a joke. It's simply just too absurd. It can't actually be happening. She sticks the cold barrel against my forehead. All right, I say. I'll do it. I'll do whatever you want, okay? I can't believe I'm about to do this, but I don't think I have a choice. What cop would risk losing her job by actually putting the barrel of a gun against someone's head without really meaning it? Take a deep breath and look down at the spill. That's right, fucko, she says softly now. And do yourself a favor. Watch your tone, because I get angry sometimes. Real angry. And you don't want to see me get angry. I lower my face into the paint. The fumes speak gales of poison chemicals. I use my lips to urge the paint back towards the bucket, but I keep my mouth tightly shut. Keep going, she says, a hint of sick amusement in her voice. Do it again and again. She just wants to humiliate me, that's all. She'll make me do this for a while and then she'll let me go. I'll let her humiliate me. Then I'll get back in my truck and leave. Suddenly, she grabs the paint can and hurls it away. It sails across the garage and hits the wall. Spring drips on the floor where it lands spinning. Startled, I look up at her. The paint's no good anymore, stupid. Never mind getting it back in the can. Eat it. The gravity around me seems to double. Images of warning labels flash through my mind, the kind of labels you see on paint cans. Harmful or fatal if swallowed, emergency poison control, etc. And she really expects me to eat it? Look, I'm sorry about that one time I annoyed you if that's what this is about, but I've learned my lesson, okay? She steps on top of my head, forcing my face into the mess. She pushes down harder, squashing my nose. I yelp into the bubbling paint. All right, stop. She lifts her foot and I push away from the floor. There's a swirl of blood in the white paint where my nose was. Red specks drip and blossom. It's broken. I felt it snap. You did it to yourself, stupid, she says. He who committeth adultery destroyeth himself. Now eat that paint or I'll kill you. I'm David Bender. I've been delivering in this town for 8 years now. Call me naive, unrealistic, good-natured, whatever. But not for 1 second did I ever expect to be kidnapped by psychotic lesbians on Christmas. Chapter 2. She made me eat the paint. I was sick midway through, which was somewhat a relief, until she forced me to eat that as well. Paint, vomit, blood. Sometime during the ordeal, I sort of separated from my body. It feels like a bad dream to me now. My plans to beat traffic out of here have fallen through. The big box I brought contained a cage, the kind of thing you'd use to crate train a big dog. Sheila watched me assemble it at gunpoint, and now I'm locked inside. I tried bending the bars, but they're too strong. It's a fine quality cage. If I manage to get out of it alive, I'll be sure to recommend it to my other customers. Shortly after she locked me in here, I heard the diesel engine of my truck fire up. My hope for rescue dissipated in a crunch of the gravel as it rolled around the garage and behind the house, where I knew no one would be able to see it. That was yesterday. I figure I've been sitting here for around a day. No evidence that anyone's looking for me. Not a siren, not a mention on the TV inside, only the constant quacking of salesmen on the home shopping channel. And to make matters worse, it's deadly cold. The door creaks open, and in comes Kelly. The wooden planks groan as she makes her way down the steps into the garage. She walks tentatively around the front of the cage, watching me guiltily, like I'm some sort of confined animal. Kelly, how long have I known you? How long have I been delivering your packages? She doesn't answer right away. It's like she's surprised that the thing in the cage is able to speak. A long time, she says. Thanks for that. You're welcome. Now, have I ever done anything wrong to you? She shakes her head. No, she says. So why are you doing this? Daddy's doing it, not me. I'm not doing anything. It's your house. I'm being held prisoner in your house. Sorry about all that. It's all right, Kelly. I don't blame you, but you have to let me out of here. Daddy said not to. Sheila? She kidnapped me. She broke my nose and made me eat poison. She's holding me captive. She's breaking the law. She seems confused. She's the police. She's insane. She's a criminal, and she's doing it in your house. So if you don't let me out of here, you're an accomplice. She looks confused again, but doesn't answer. I change tacks. Kelly, how long have we been friends? Friends? You're one of my best customers. Maybe my best customer of all. I see you almost every day. I consider that friends, don't you? For the first time ever, I see color seep into her pale cheeks. I suppose you don't think so anymore. It's all right. We're still friends. Still friends. I don't blame you for putting me in here, but you have to let me out. If you don't, what choice do I have but to blame you too? She frowns. Daddy said not to let you out. She said to give you a bath. A bath? She nods. A glint of hope returns. Whatever she's planning, maybe I'll find an opening to escape. And when I do, I won't fail. I'll get out of here, even if it means digging Kelly's eyes out of her head. I'm sizing her up as she's digging in a pile of junk in the corner. She's a big woman, but if it comes down to it, I'll run right through her. She finds what she was looking for and yanks it out of the pile. It's a coiled garden hose. She starts to unravel it. These old things get so stiff in the cold, she says. Kelly, you're not going to turn that hose on me, are you? That's what Daddy said to do. Kelly, I'll freeze. It's December. It's too cold. How about maybe a regular bath? Daddy said to use the hose. I'm pleading now. Kelly, listen. There has to be some other way. Won't Sheila be mad when I die of hypothermia? She appears uneasy. She squeezes her thin lips together and stomps out the side door of the garage. I hear her making some bizarre grunting noises out there, then the squeak of the spigot. My heart quickens at the thought of the cold water. Sure, I was looking for an angle to escape when I told her not to use the hose, but I also meant what I said. If she turns that hose on me, I don't know how much colder I can get before I... She comes back through the door with the running hose. Kelly, I'm your friend. You can trust me. And trust me, you don't want to do this. I have to do what Daddy says. Now go ahead. Undress. I promise I won't look. I don't have room in here to undress. Plus, if you won't open the door, how will I get the clothes out of the way anyway? She just stands there with the water splashing on the floor. A droplet hits my face. It's freezing. It's colder than freezing. It's liquid nitrogen. Finally, she shrugs. I guess you're right. I never thought of that. Relief. See? This is all wrong, Kelly. None of it makes sense. You have to let me out. Don't you see that? I guess you can leave your clothes on. I'm sorry. She turns the hose on me. The shock of the water is so jarring, I can't breathe. I try hiding my head from the water, but she makes a point of trying to get all the dry paint out of my hair. When she decides she's done, she goes back outside and turns off the spigot. She looks guilty when she comes back into the garage. Sorry about that, she says. My hand got wet. It's pretty cold. You must be pretty cold. I'm already shaking uncontrollably. I'm going to freeze, I manage. I said sorry. I have to warm up. You have to help me. I gotta see if it's okay with Daddy. Call her then to tell her I'm freezing. She doesn't like it when I call her when she's working. She stands there wringing her hands, this stupid look on her face. I knew she was slow to begin with, but I never would have guessed anyone on earth was this flaky. She is utterly hateable. Chapter 3. I thought I had been cold before. I thought I'd been cold delivering packages out in this weather, but I had no idea what cold really was. I'm not shivering. I'm convulsing. My clothes are frozen. My hair's crisp with frost. I can't feel my fingers or my toes. I put my fingers in my mouth, and they feel like ice. I can't do it for long, or the pain hits like a clamp tightening down on the bones. Images of black fingers and toes, pictures I had seen of outdoor adventurers who had been lost in the wilderness, or mountain climbers who had been too long out in the snow. People who had lost their noses from frostbite. The soundtrack to this whole ordeal is the Home Shopping Channel, like some sort of audio torture machine. All magical miracle products. The magic mop can soak up the Great Lakes. The magic scarf keeps you warm on Pluto and beyond. The magic pocket pole saw folds to fit in your pocket, cuts down giant sequoias in a single stroke. I'm shaken from my thoughts by the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Not the loud warble of Sheila's Jeep, but a normal, regular car. I sit upright, knocking my head on the roof of the cage. Help! Help! In the garage! I've been sitting here trying to convince myself someone would come and find me soon. If they ask the guy who loads my truck in the morning, he'll have to remember that enormous box. They'd assume I had delivered that one first, and he'd remember the address on the box, or at least the street, and he'd tell them, and they'd send someone here to find me. Is this the guy? My rescuer? The garage door is on its way up, but silhouetted in the moonlight isn't the hero of the day. She's got a thumb tucked in her gun belt. The other hand dangles a nightstick. Truculently, she saunters over to the cage, a freezing breeze following her in. Sheila decided to stop by and check in on me. How thoughtful. I'm too cold to be scared. What could she possibly do to hurt me now? So shoot me, I'm thinking. Go ahead. I won't even feel it. Had your bath, I see. You must be chilly. I'm hypothermic. I need a doctor. As melodramatic as you are nosy. You should be a journalist for one of those satanic gossip magazines. And by the way, don't bother screaming for help. It'll do you no good here. Here or in the next life. No one can hear you, so save your breath. If I stay out here in this cage, I'm going to die. We're all going to die, stupid. It's what happens afterwards that's important. And what happens to you isn't going to be pretty. Her mouth twists into a sick grin. You'll remember this cold fondly from where you're going. Why are you doing this? Is that what your little whores ask you? Why are you doing this? Why are you turning Orange Oaks into the next Gomorrah? And you call me nosy? I snap. Her expression goes from righteous to murderous. She takes a few menacing steps towards the cage. It's my job to know what goes on in this town, fucko. I'm the law. And here you come every day with your smart remarks and your sweet talk. And packages for my girlfriend. And who knows what sort of devilish things you're thinking when you come here. Well, you've got more pressing matters now, don't you? I can't believe what I just heard. You actually think I've been hitting on Kelly? My best customer, she mocks. Oh, you're my best customer, Kelly Dumont. She can't really mean what she's saying, can she? She's just prodding me, trying to get me angry, and it's working. Defeated as I am, the absurdity of what I'm hearing flips my switch to rage. You don't even believe the bullshit you're spouting. You calling me a liar? A lying psycho, and you don't give a shit about Kelly either. Think I don't know about her money? Now let me out of this fucking cage, you cunt. Her eyes are wide as saucers. Why, you little fuck. It's all or nothing now. I grab the bars and pull with every molecule of exertion I can manage. I mean to tear through these bars and tear through Sheila. Nightstick or no nightstick, gun or no gun, I'm getting out of this cage right now. In my rage, I don't notice the nightstick coming down until it hits my frozen fingertips. Wood, fingernail, bone, and steel, like 10 lightning bolts. The fight drains from me in an instant. All functions cease. Chapter 4. I come back to life in new surroundings. I'm still shivering, but it's warmer now. The television is louder too. Order the highly collectible holiday candelabra set and receive a free gift. I'm inside the house. There's a staircase in front of me, a blacked-out window behind me, a laundry room off to the right. The same musty old air and mothballs smell I'm assaulted with when I deliver Kelly's packages. It occurs to me that Sheila must have carried the cage inside with me still in it. My mouth is gagged and it's difficult to breathe. I claw at it, but my fingers are nearly useless. The agony confirms my most recent memories. She smashed them with her nightstick. The crazy bitch crushed my fingers. One way or another, I've got to get this gag off. I try again to wedge my thumbs between the fabric and my cheeks, but I end up with my hands in my lap, waiting for the flames in my fingers to cool. It's impossible. I remember when Kelly turned the hose on me, I hated her even more than Sheila. Now there's nobody I hate more than Sheila. If the opportunity presents itself, I'll kill her. I make myself that promise. I tip onto my back and start kicking the bars. It's impossible to break the cage. I already tried to in the garage. I'm just calling for a little room service. After making a nice racket for a few minutes, I hear the floorboards creak in the living room. It's Kelly getting up off the couch. I'll bet she's upset she has to get off her ass. What if she misses the deal of the century? Slowly, Kelly shuffles across the house. She flips on a light and stands in the mouth of the hallway, regarding me again like a feral animal caught in a trap. "The collector's edition is on," she says. I point to my gag. I sign with my hands that I can't breathe. "What's the matter?" I thrust out my useless hands. After a minute, she seems to understand that I want the gag taken out. "Daddy said not to open the door." I make the sign for scissors. "Scissors? But those are good stockings." I snort through my nose, demonstrating how hard it is to breathe. I mime choking again. "If I cut it off, you promise to be quiet?" "Yes," I nod vehemently. "I guess it's all right. Hold on." She shuffles off, then comes back to the cage with a huge set of sewing scissors. "Come closer," she says. I press my face against the cage, and gently she slides one blade of the scissors between the gag and my cheek. She snips a few times, and it falls out of my mouth. She puts the scissors down on the floor and pulls the stocking out of the cage. "There," she says. "Thank you." "The stockings are ruined," she says. I want to scream at her. I want to tell her to just cut the shit and let me out, but I know it's not going to happen if I do that. She'll never let her guard down if I give her both barrels. God damn it, I'm a truck driver, not a fucking psychologist. "Sorry about your stockings, Kelly, but look at my hands." I hold out my battered hands. She glances blankly at them. "Kelly, I really need a doctor." "Daddy gets mad sometimes, but she doesn't mean it." Whether she meant it or not, she smashed my hands. I need some kind of medical care. A doctor, a nurse, a veterinarian, doesn't matter, but I need some help, okay? She just stands there looking at her feet. She feels guilty. I can tell she does. "Kelly, I know you don't want to upset Sheila, but she's crazy. Can't you see that?" "I don't know," she says. "I don't want to do anything wrong. I'm always making mistakes." "Kelly, this is all a mistake. You can't kidnap people and feed them paint and torture them. You understand that, don't you?" She was quiet, just staring guiltily at her slippers. How am I supposed to get through to her? "Kelly, listen. Sheila is using you. She doesn't care about you. She's only interested in your money. You realize that?" She's taken aback for a moment. "That's not true," she says. "She wants your money, Kelly. She doesn't care about you." "She said she's trying to protect me." "That doesn't make any sense. Protect you from what? From me?" The color seeps into her cheeks again. It takes me a second to realize why, but when I do, I can hardly believe it. Does Sheila really think I have the hots for Kelly? "From me?" I asked. Kelly's face is mottled red. I'm about to assure her that nothing could possibly be further from the case, but I stop myself. Maybe that's not the best approach after all. "I better go. The collector's edition is on." "Wait, Kelly, just..." She's already shuffling back down the hall. By the look of the sun through the laundry room window, it's early afternoon. I'm guessing I've got 6 hours until Sheila gets home. 6 hours to figure out a way to get out of here. My hands hurt so much I can barely think. I consider calling Kelly back to beg her for an ice pack, maybe a few aspirin, but I change my mind. I do wish Kelly was sharp enough to realize how crazy this whole thing was, but the fact that she's so easily distracted might offer my second best scenario for survival. On the floor, an arm's distance from the cage, lies this gigantic heavy set of sewing scissors. Chapter 5. I've been nice and quiet, as promised. I'm thinking of a way to get those scissors. Only hours earlier, I might have been able to get my fingers through the bars, but now they're swollen to twice their normal circumference. There's a way to do everything. I've always believed that. I just have to figure out what it is. I've got my clothes, I've got my shoes. I can pull out a shoelace, but what can I use as a hook? I try going into my pockets, but my hands are so swollen I can't get them in. I reach down to undo my pants, and right away it hits me. My work pants close with a hook and eye, no buttons. There it is, my hook. I just need to get it off somehow. My fingers are hopeless. Even if they were in their usual condition, I'd never be able to scratch through the durable stitching. I'll have to bite through it. It's murder untying the double-knotted laces of my boots, now twice as tight from being soaked and drying again, but I bear down and scratch apart the knots. Never before have I imagined the capacity for pain in each fingertip. Still, I work. Teeth gritted, the sound of some TV salesman barking in the background, I pull a lace through the eyelets. Repeating the process, I remove my other boot and slither out of my pants. Then I set to chewing at the polyester around the hook. Eventually, one side of the hook pulls out from the waistband. I see how it's sewed in now. There are 3 holes where it's threaded in. I work surgically on the strong thread, nibbling at it like a rodent. With a final bite, the hook pulls free. I hold it in my hand, my fingers pulsing like 10 little hearts. The curve of the hook is too tight to grab the handle of the scissors. I'll have to bend it open somehow. Using the eye still on the waistband, I hold the hook in my teeth and pull against it until I feel it bend. Once it's bent, I spit it out and put my thumbs in my mouth like a baby. As soon as I can stand it, I chew the end off my shoelace and unravel the thread at the end. Once I have enough length, I pick up the hook and with shaking hands try to guide some thread through an eyelet. It takes a while, but eventually I hit the target. Then I hear the creak of springs. Kelly is getting off of the couch again. She'll know something is wrong if she sees my pants are off. Quiet as I can, my heart hammering, I kick my legs into my pants and pull them back on. She's walking towards the hall. I grab my hook and lace and tuck them under my shirt and try to compose myself. The footsteps stop. It's quiet for a moment. Then I hear her voice from halfway across the house. "Yes, hello. I'd like to order the candy cane earrings and pendant set." "Yes. No, my information hasn't changed." I take a breath. I go under my shirt for my hook and lace and see I had pulled the thread out in my panic. Now I'll have to get it back in. There's only a touch of light coming through the west-facing hall now, dark from the laundry room. I'm guessing it's 5 o'clock. I squeeze into the corner of the cage, into the slowly receding triangle of light. After a number of tries, I get the thread through again. I tie it to another fray of thread and double knot it and pull it tight with my teeth. And there it is, in the diminishing twilight, the product of my day's work. Now I set to hooking my fish. I toss the hook out over the scissors and drag it back. Kelly startles me by getting up again, but it's only to go to the bathroom. I keep tossing the hook, but it's proving to be tougher than I thought. Kelly gets up a 3rd time, but I don't let it scare me now. I'm totally focused, in a kind of zen state. I need those scissors. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with them. I just know that I need them. It's completely dark now, only a dim glow from the kitchen. I'm working by feel, casting out my line, slowly dragging it back, and over and over, and the hook finds resistance. Carefully I draw it in, and like music, the sound of metal dragging over wooden boards. Focus. "Hello? Yes, I'd like to order the stocking hangers." "Yes, can I get those in time for Christmas?" "No, my billing information hasn't changed." I reel in the lace, straining to see the shape in the darkness. I need it perpendicular to the cage. There's a trigger-shaped nub on one of the handles, leverage for an additional finger. If I can get it through the bars, I should be able to turn the scissors on end and pull them through. Then, disaster. The lace snaps back. I hear the tink-tink-tink of my little hook skipping across the floorboards. No, this can't be happening. I press my face against the cage. I see the scissors there. They're really close. It can be done, I tell myself. I have to get those scissors. And then I hear the Jeep. No, I'm not giving up. Frantically, I jam my swollen fingers through the bars. Pain explodes in my hand, but I bite my lip and push harder. I push my hand out to the heel of my palm, or it will go no further. I wiggle my fingers, feeling desperately for the scissors, but it's no use. My stomach sinks with failure, and with the failure comes the agony. The door opens. I attempt to pull my hand back through the bars, but they're stuck. There's no time. Suddenly, I realize what I've done. The light turns on. The heavy footsteps approach. Well, well. Caught in the act. Literally caught. My fingers stuck between the bars. I look up at Sheila, a kind of malevolent amusement on her face. Find something you like, she says, and leans down to pick up the scissors. She snips the big blades a few times. Snip, snip, snip. What do you think you're going to do with these? Make your great escape? I don't bother to answer. Defeated, I just sit there. Kelly, come here. Kelly comes in, immediately looking guilty. You leave these here? Kelly considers it a moment. She nods. I swear you'd leave your ass behind if it wasn't attached to you. She stomps over to Kelly and slaps her hard across the face. No dessert for a week. Dejected, Kelly retreats back down the hall, but before she turns the corner into the living room, she steals a glance back at me. For just a millisecond, our eyes meet. And you. Wielding the scissors, she approaches the cage. There's no time to react, no way to defend myself. I'm a rodent caught in a snare. The horror as I feel the cold steel close around the tip of my pointed finger. The snap. The release of pressure. The pain. The next finger. And the next. And my hand is back inside the cage. Consciousness is slipping away. If thine eye offend thee, pluck it out. Now that should teach you to keep your grubby fingers to yourself. And your eyes to yourself while you're at it. 4 bloody nubs around Sheila's tennis shoes like discarded cigar butts. All functions cease. Chapter 6. Day 3 in the cage. Kelly fed in a length of surgical dressing to wrap my hand, which I did myself the best I could. The bleeding took hours to stop and left me drained and weak. The floor of the cage is tacky with blood. The pain, the lack of sleep, and a nasty fever drained most of my strength, but not my resolve. I can't just sit here and wait to see what happens to me. I won't give up. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to Sheila thumping down the stairs. Shamelessly, she pulled down her pants and underwear and sat on top of the cage. Pungent piss drizzled down on my face. When she was done, she chuckled. But whoso committeth adultery with a woman lacketh understanding. He that doeth it destroyeth his own soul. Get the fucketh out of here, I said. She kicked the cage. Repent, fucko. Christmas Eve, you've got a big court date, and there's no public defender for the heathen. Sleep did not return. As the morning sun peeks through the window, I'm fully aware of how exhausted I am. I've had nothing to eat or drink for more than 3 days. It feels alien and bizarre to be both conscious and this exhausted at once. Christmas Eve. You've got a big court date, she had said. If I'm counting right, that's the day after tomorrow. If the dehydration and the fever don't get me first, Sheila means to kill me. A sacrifice to Jesus on his birthday? Is that what she's planning? When you're tired enough, when you're defeated enough, you start reconciling yourself to your situation. It's probably just my exhaustion speaking, but I find myself thinking no one's going to miss me when I'm gone. So does it really mean anything at all that I'm in here? Does it matter to the world that I'm going to die like this? I'm very, very tired. Chapter 7. 1 day left. I almost wish she'd just get it over with already. Kelly comes by to check on me. I don't know what time it is. "How's your hand?" she says. I look up at her, concern on her face, a kind of oblivious concern. I'm inclined to ignore her, maybe just flip her off with my stubby middle finger. But no, not yet. I have to keep trying. "How are you?" I reply. I'm shocked to hear my own voice. I've never sounded so frail to myself. Once she understands I'm referring to her being slapped by Sheila, her eyes turn to the floor. "It was my fault for leaving the scissors out. I'm always forgetting things." "It's not your fault. You don't deserve to get hit. No more than I deserve this." "She gets mad sometimes." "I noticed," I say, weakly lifting my hand. "Kelly, this is your house. Why do you put up with anyone treating you like that? Hitting you, telling you what to eat? Why?" "She never told me what to eat." "No dessert for a week? Why should anyone have the right to tell you that? She treats you like a child." She was quiet for a moment. "That's not what she meant." Sounded pretty clear to me. "It's not about what I eat. It's her way of saying she's not going to take care of my needs." "Your needs?" "Every woman has needs," she says. She's blushing again. "Oh," I say. "So dessert isn't about what Kelly eats. It's about what Sheila eats." I try not to appear disgusted. "My needs are very important to me," she goes on. "So that's how she punishes me when I mess up." "So why are you with someone who punishes you?" "I'm not the smartest, I know that. But I'm not stupid either. She's the only one that'll have me. I know that much." "Aren't you afraid of her?" "Sometimes, but I'm also afraid of being alone. She protects me, and she eats dessert every day. Well, usually anyway." Again, I tried to ignore my imagination. I don't know what to say. Am I supposed to disagree? Tell her she's got all the options in the world? Even she would know that I'm bullshitting her. She'd never trust me after such a blatant lie. "I'm sorry," I say. It was all I could think of to say. Strangely, I kind of mean it. "I'm sorry too," she says. The tone explains it all. Sheila Stone might not be the boss of the police force. She might not be the boss of all the men she so reviles. But she's the boss of this household, and she's clearly the boss of Kelly. Because even Kelly Dumont understands that no one else would be willing to take that job. Kelly leaves the room, leaves me there wondering how I'm supposed to get her on my side. If all that's happened already hasn't been enough, what am I supposed to do? There has to be a way. She has to have a weakness. Something even greater than the fear of being alone. Chapter 8. It's early afternoon, Christmas Eve, the day of my big court date. Kelly is in the living room watching her shows. I'm lying here half-conscious, the sales commentary on the television weaving a weird thread through reality and the feverish dream world I slip in and out of. Shifting contexts. The dry eye onion chopper. Love onions? Hate chopping them? Why cry? With the dry eye onion chopper, you can have your onions and eat 'em too. Soups, omelets, casseroles, salads. And it doesn't stop there. Just watch how quickly it dices this tomato. The magic pocket pull saw. Why struggle with those hard-to-use, impossible-to-carry tools? The magic pocket pull saw folds to fit perfectly in your pocket, and the 10-inch blade utilizes shark tooth technology to cut on the pull stroke, to easily slice through hard drywall, thick branches, even PVC pipe. I'm waiting for a news alert to cut through the monotony. Missing delivery driver. If anyone has any information, call 999-1234. Anything. But there's nothing. It's like I've suddenly become insubstantial. An inconsequential man. No one even notices that I'm gone. None of the women on my route notice I'm gone. There's no one back at my one-bedroom apartment waiting for me to return. It occurs to me that I've never let anyone become important enough to me to care if I disappear. Oddly, what Kelly said earlier begins to resonate with me. She's the only one I have. I'd give anything to have someone right now. Even someone as rotten as Sheila Stone. Just someone who cared that I'd disappeared off the face of the earth. I'm on my own. I've always been. But I've always made it work. And I have to make it work now. Kelly, I call. My throat is dry as sandpaper. I don't know why I'm about to do this. All I know is that I have to do something besides sit here and wait. I hear the creak of the couch, and then she comes. Kelly, my truck is full of all that stuff you like on TV. Since it's not getting delivered, you might as well help yourself to it. I sense a glint of excitement in her eyes, but it just as quickly goes out. I thought about that, but Daddy told me I can't. Why not? She said I better not. It's just sitting there for the taking. Daddy says she could get caught if anyone tracks any of the stuff to her. She wouldn't notice if you took just a couple of things, would she? She thought about that. I guess not, but even if I did, she has the keys. I know how to get into the cargo area without the keys, you know. You do? Listen, right next to the bulkhead door, there's a keyhole for the lock. But if you bump your fist against the wall right above that lock, it bounces up the latch. So if you pull the door and bump the wall just right, the door will pop open and you can get in. It's easy. She's so excited by the idea. I can literally see the effects of addiction taking over. A home shopping bonanza, just a few steps and a pound of a fist away. It's just too titillating to resist, even at the peril of Sheila Stone's wrath. Maybe I'll go try, she says, just to see. Go ahead, I say. It's all yours. A few minutes later, I hear the pounding on the bulkhead door behind the house. Bang, bang, bang. This goes on for a minute or two, getting steadily louder. Maybe someone will hear the banging. It's unlikely. The house is pretty well isolated from the other houses on the street, but there's always a chance. Eventually, the banging stops, and I know she's gotten the door open. I know she's back there with her eyes spinning. It must be like a little kid in the toy store for the first time. Home shopping addict's heaven. It's quiet for 20 minutes or so, and then she comes back inside, hopeless to conceal her excitement. There's so much stuff, she says. I got a salad chopper. I got a jeweled bracelet. At least someone can enjoy all that stuff, I say. Can I go look again? She asks. Of course, I say. Why not? I want to, but what if Sheila finds out? You can just say you ordered it. She's not going to know you went in the truck. She has the keys, remember? If she finds anything, I could just say I bought it, she says. That's right, I say. Because she's got the keys. That's right. And you promise you won't tell her? Of course not. I'm on your side, Kelly, not hers. I don't like Sheila. I like you. Kelly doesn't exactly blush when she blushes. It's like her cheeks and nose become marbled with blood. All right, I guess I'll have another look. Enjoy, I tell her. You deserve to treat yourself once in a while. Kelly is out there a long time. I doubt all of this is going to do me any good, but it's worth a try. After all, it's all I have to give her. I can't offer her companionship. I can't take Sheila's place. All I have is a truck full of the drugs she's addicted to. Funny to think of it, too, in this instance. She's chosen the drug over Sheila. Eventually, she comes back inside, her pockets stuffed with goodies. She looks at me quietly for a moment. "Why are you being so nice?" she asks. I don't know if I should say. "What is it?" "You're my best customer, Kelly." She smiles and looks away. "You're just saying that." Sheila was right about me. She knew you're my favorite customer. She's jealous. Kelly's cheeks were mottled red again. "She does get jealous." "Do you think less of me?" I ask. "No," she says. "I just thought you'd never be so nice to a girl like me, and especially not after this." "You've always been nice to me, Kelly. You didn't do this to me. Sheila did." I know my future might ride on the next question, but I have to ask it. "Don't you like me too, Kelly? At all, I mean?" A strained silence while she decides how to answer. "I told Sheila I thought you were cute. I think that's how this whole mess started." "That's why she did this?" "Are you mad at me?" "I'm actually kind of flattered," I tell her. "Really?" "I'm happy you like me too. I didn't know you were into..." "Boys?" "Yeah." "I guess I like both. Sheila says I'm just confused, but I've always kinda liked both." I can't believe it. Of all the ironic things, Kelly Dumont, of all people, goes both ways. And I could tell by her body language that she was telling the truth. That's when I decide to play my last card. "Kelly, let me out of this cage and we can be together. I'll protect you. I'll be nice to you. I won't be like Sheila. I'll be your man." There's a pained look on her face, a look of regret. "But I can't. Sheila will be so mad." I didn't expect her to say yes. I'm only setting up my final attempt. "Then, at least let me do something for you." "For me? What is it?" "I want to eat dessert." Her face freezes. For a moment, I think she could react a number of ways. She could run out of here screaming. She could politely decline my offer. But I can see the addictive part of her, the same part that can't stop home shopping, the same part with these needs she mentioned to me. I can see it taking over. "You want to do that for me?" she says. "I'm good at it," I say. "You know that, don't you?" "I bet you are," she says, her voice cracking. She's blushing now, blushing deeply. Her eyes are glassy. She's wringing her hands. "I'm really good," I say. "You'll never forget it." I've never seen a woman react to the prospect of dessert the way she is right now. It's like dangling a filet mignon in front of a tiger. "But I can't let you out," she says. "Sit on top of the cage," I say. "Just pull those down and sit right here. I've got enough room between these bars." It isn't long before she starts fiddling with the button on her jeans, and I'm telling myself I'd rather eat a can of old paint. Maybe have my fingers crushed again. Maybe worse. It's the worst thing I'll ever have to do in my life. She positions herself over the cage and sits down, already dripping wet. It's a deadly assault on all 5 senses. "Don't tell," she says weakly, and I know she couldn't have resisted if she wanted to. There's no helping herself. She needs me to do it. and she needs me to stay quiet. I won't, I say, and driven only by a primal will to live, I set to work at the most distasteful job I have ever done. Being a courier, I think, from some distant, quiet place in my mind, sure isn't all fun and games. Chapter 9. The Jeep rolls over the gravel like an execution van. I sit there in my cage waiting for my imminent release. One way or another, I'm getting out of here soon. Most likely dead. But if that's the way it's going to happen, I'm not going to make it easy for her. It's been fun, fucko, but I'm afraid you've outstayed your welcome. She's back in her sweats, looking and smelling as awful as ever. This evil smirk on her face, just smeared with excitement. She's been looking forward to this. A question occurs to me. What leads a person like her to take such pleasure in hurting a guy like me? Whichever way this ends up, I really want to know. What's wrong with you? I say. I mean, what the hell is really wrong with you? There's rage in her face again, but it quickly turns to that sick grin. Typical of a heathen. You think it's your job to be judge and jury? Well, cast the beam out of thine own eye first, fucko. Sheila kicks the cage, sending me against the back wall. Then she grabs hold of the bars and hoists the cage up in the air. I can't believe how strong she is. Suspended there, she says to me, "Let's get some fresh air, shall we?" She dumps me and the cage out on the cinder block patio in the backyard. I'm assaulted by the strong odor of gasoline. Then I see the can. My heart rate doubles. No, not like this. We're gonna have a little barbecue, fucko. It's only gonna be a little warm-up compared to where you're going. Where's the mercy? I say. What? She glares at me. The mercy. You're doing this because you hate me. I understand that. Because you think I've been hitting on your girlfriend, which isn't even true, but you think you're perfect? That you're not going to be judged yourself? We're all going to be judged, she says. So, how do you think this is going to look for you? Torturing and killing someone, not even giving me the chance to change. Trying to teach me a lesson is one thing, but that's not what you're doing. You just want to kill me. How can you be doing God's work? You only want to deliver me into the hands of the devil. In the hands of the devil is where you belong. I'm only expediting the process. I'm cleaning you off of God's earth. So, what about you? Are you going to have a chance to change, or should you just go ahead and join me yourself? I've been serving God while you've been out whoring around town. For such persons do not serve our Lord Christ, but their own appetites. And by smooth talk and flattery, they deceive the hearts of the naive. So, what makes you think for a minute that I plan to join you? Convenient how you memorize everything in the Bible, except for the parts about homosexuality. She has no answer for me. I didn't think she would. And you've got nothing to repent for? I say. Well, what if I meant to repent? What if it's God's plan for me to be saved after all? If you kill me, you're standing in the way of God's plan. And then you can add that one to your list, can't you? Shut your mouth, she says through her teeth. Homosexuality, murder, and who knows what else. That's using your head, Sheila. You sound like heavenly material to me. That may have been a bit much. That same look in her eyes, like the lights go black. You think I'm like your naive girlfriends? Like Kelly? You'd like to defile all the women in town, but you can't defile me. Angrily, she yanks down her sweatpants. I defile you. She sits on the cage, the bars creaking under her weight. I defile you, she repeats. But I've been defiled enough. This is just what I've been waiting for. I move quickly. I thrust upwards into the roof of the cage. The impaling blow meets no resistance until the hilt of my hand hits the steel bars. For a moment, time itself seems to come to a halt. Performing the act on Kelly, I had had her distracted enough to hook a belt loop of her jeans down by her ankle. Dragging it closer to the bars, I got a finger into the pocket, then 2 fingers. Doing the most inspired work I could, she didn't even notice as I guided the knurled plastic handle between the bars and into my cage. I didn't even have to look at it. I knew what it was by the feel of it. I had heard the infomercial 1,000 times. The magic pocket pull saw folds to fit in your pocket. The 10-inch razor-sharp blade with piranha tooth technology cuts on the pull stroke to slice through the toughest materials with ease. Drywall, wood, PVC, and much, much more. It's too dark to know exactly where the blade is right now, but I know that all 10 inches of it are inside Sheila's stone. And I know those serrated teeth are angled downwards, poised to do what they were designed to do, to cut on the pull stroke. And with all the force I have left, I lean against the saw blade's teeth and pull. The tearing flesh feels like the ripping of a burlap sack. A rain of hot fluid issues from above, and this time I know it isn't just piss. The noise that comes out of Sheila is burning liquid astonishment. She rolls off the cage and thumps onto the cinder blocks, some of them audibly cracking. She's wailing in some preposterous language. She's speaking in tongues. I glance down at the saw blade, ribbons of gore dangling from the teeth, shining wet red in the yellow light of the porch. I want to throw it away, as far away as I can, but I resist the urge. I cling to it. I worked hard for it. It's mine. Daddy? Kelly turns the light on, illuminating a scene so grisly I can barely believe I had anything to do with it. Sheila lay convulsing on her side, pants around her ankles in an expanding pool of blood. Gouts of it cascading from her crotch, soaking into the porous brick. Kelly was unable to speak. She held the door to steady herself. Go, Kelly. Call 911. Kelly looks at me, then Sheila. I understand her predicament. If she calls, I'll be found. She'll have betrayed Sheila's wishes. But if she doesn't call, her girlfriend will just die right there on the patio. Kelly! She looks at me. Her face is so ghostly white, I'm afraid she'll faint. Kelly, it'll be all right. I know it doesn't seem that way, but it's going to be fine. You have to call 911. She's still reluctant, standing there with her lips contorting like little pink worms. What happens if I call for help? She says. I can see she's disoriented and confused. The paramedics will come and help her, I say. What will happen to you? What does she want to hear? That they'll free me? That they'll leave me here in the cage? That I'll stay with her either way? I consider my words carefully. After a moment, I find my reply. From now on, you won't have to worry about being alone anymore. It wasn't a lie. They'd never let her out on her own again. Fucko. It's Sheila. She's getting to her feet. Streams of blood pour down her legs and into her sweatpants, still down around her knees, but she doesn't seem to care. Her eyes aren't hers anymore. She's possessed. She screams, charging the cage. The impact is like a lion charging his prey on the Serengeti. Depart from me, ye cursed! She slams the cage. My face hits the bars, and with a grunt, I'm lifted right back into the air. Into everlasting fire. I'm bracing myself for the next impact, but there is a pause. Suddenly, she drops the cage. I crash to the ground, but not so hard this time. I smell gasoline again. Sheila turns around, her arms sprawled like a bear. The back of her sweatshirt is soaked, and I smell right away that it's gasoline. My vision clears, and there's Kelly, holding the gas can, an expression on her face somewhere between guilt and defiance. I can't believe it. Kelly has turned the corner. I won't let you hurt him anymore, she says. Sheila balls her fists, blood still pouring from her undercarriage. She's shaking with fury. Possessed, standing only by some crazy force it isn't even in me to comprehend. You bitch, I should have known. After all I've done for you. No dessert. No dessert ever. She charges Kelly. Kelly, I see, who has her finger on the trigger of the safe T-bone barbecue lighter, lights your barbecue from a safe distance, the first time, every time. Say goodbye to singed eyelashes, no more dangerous flare-ups. Lots of lighter fluid? No worries. Light your barbecue from 2 feet away with a telescopic stainless steel tube. Crazy lesbian psychopath? Set her on fire without so much as an errant spark. Sheila goes up with a consuming thwomp. A screaming, twisting fireball. She spins, falls to the ground, begins rolling around. She crashes into the side of the cage. Flames finger their way through the bars. I push myself backward as far as I can. She springs up suddenly and sprawls on top of the cage. A shred of burning material falls through the bars and lands on my chest, and I swat it away. I can smell the flesh burning, mixing with the smell of the gas. She flails at the bars, pounding, charring black before my eyes. Pounding, pounding softer. Then she stops. Softly beyond the crackling flames, I hear Kelly weeping gently. Chapter 10. So I suppose you'll want to know what happened after that. I don't know if Sheila was still alive or not when the paramedics got there. One cop saw it halfway through the hasp of the lock before they thought to check Sheila for the key. Turns out she had it right in her pocket. A paramedic in the ambulance asked me what had happened back there. It's all a little foggy at this point. Between the dehydration and the drugs they were pumping into me, I doubt I said much coherently at all. I think I had some uncharacteristically kind things to say about gimmicky TV products. After all, someone believed in these ideas enough to invest the money to produce and market them. Someone, for example, knew the value of a good pole saw. He understood, too, that a pole saw was too long to comfortably carry around in your pocket. The answer to this issue was, and is, the Magic Pocket Pole Saw. It's a fine tool, much better than you'd expect from a mail order show. I've since recommended it to many fellow delivery guys, and I happen to know for a fact that they carry them around in their trucks. I've been delivering in Orange Oaks for over 8 years now. Funny how much you learn about a town delivering packages there day after day. Know how they named the town Orange Oaks? Most people think it's the color of the foliage in autumn, but it's not the leaves, it's those clusters of orange mushrooms that grow in the crotches of oak trees. Chicken of the woods, they're called. Funny name for a mushroom, huh? Driving around the same streets every day, it's like you've got your finger on the pulse of the town. You can sense the collective feeling of the community when people are cheerful, when they're stressed out, when they're excitable, etc. Now that I'm back to work, everyone seems a bit distracted. It must be strange to see me back in the driver's seat. The town is just a little quieter, like someone turned down the volume a bit. Or maybe it's just that no one starts talking until they see my brake lights are safely down the street and out of listening distance. They all know what happened to me. The basics of it anyway. But no one mentions it. They just peek down at my gloved hand and use their imaginations. Last I heard, my best customer is in some institution a few towns over. I try not to think about her, but when I do, I don't really feel resentment. For some reason, I just feel kind of bad. The house has been listed for sale since they took her away, but so far no offers. I hope they let her watch the shopping channel in there, wherever she is. It's springtime now. Orange clusters in the old oak roots and yellow tide lines of pollen smeared across the asphalt point the direction to my next delivery. Young couples in shorts and skirts meander down Main Street with their ice cream cones and milkshakes. I toot my solitary horn. I don't linger so much at my customers' front doors these days, but that's my choice as well as theirs. My lingering days are gone the way of my fingertips. Besides the fact that no one wants to be groped by my stumpy hand, it wouldn't feel the same for me either. Not in any sense of the word. I haven't sworn off of women or anything, it's just they don't appeal to me the same way they used to. I can't decide if I've failed them or if they've failed me. Maybe both. One day I'll meet someone different, someone who's been failed herself, someone looking for another failure to team up with, to be loyal to. It must be nice to have someone like that. Even Kelly Dumont once had someone a little like that. Is it unreasonable to think that Orange Oak's secret man might settle down someday? Who knows? Trust me, stranger things have happened.
The White Face in the Window. Written by Ledesma. Narrated by Caden von Clegg.
Last winter, I was walking through a park near my apartment when I came across 5 young boys attempting to smash an object with a hammer. Granted, Chicago children are probably more violent than most, but I'm not used to seeing such things in my particular neighborhood. I jogged over to them, mostly out of curiosity, but also to make sure they weren't torturing some poor squirrel or a pigeon or something. If I had known the sort of thing I was about to come in contact with, I would have probably went home and bolted the door. One of the boys was clutching some sort of dark, wooden board covered with black paint and holding it at arm's length with his face turned away and his eyes closed. A second boy, I remember one of his friends calling him either Peter or Paul, was aggressively prying the hammer out of the hands of the boy who had been swinging at the wooden board moments earlier while the other 2 kids watched without saying a word. In spite of all the hammering and arguing, the surface of the board looked perfectly smooth and intact from the angle I was approaching. I put on my toughest adult voice and got the kids to quit yelling and fighting over the hammer just long enough to ask them what in the hell they were trying to do. The boy holding the hammer, Peter or Paul, looked me straight in the face and said, "We're gonna break the devil into 6 pieces and bury him in the woods." I was stunned, but also amused. I figured he had seen something like this on television and sort of laughed it off as I said, "So you kids think this plank is the devil?" Peter, or Paul, was clearly not pleased by this question and said something along the lines of, "Are you stupid or what? That thing ain't a plank." As I took my first look at the wooden board up close, I was surprised to see that the entire surface had not been painted with black paint as I had first thought. It was actually hand-painted to the point that it was nearly covered with a language I wasn't familiar with. It looked vaguely Asian or Middle Eastern. It was entirely alien to me aside from the upper left and right corners, which displayed very detailed paintings of the sun and moon. In the center of both the sun and moon were unnerving faces with blank expressions. As I thought about this last detail, it became clear to me that this board was some sort of antique handmade Ouija. Peter, or Paul, explained to me that his grandfather owned an antique store and was on his deathbed. He had requested that the boy's mother take this board from his store safe and break it into 6 pieces and dispose of it immediately, burying each piece in the woods not less than a mile apart from each other. He would not say why this had to be done, but continuously referred to the board as that wooden devil. When the boy's mother had refused, thinking it ludicrous, as any rational person would, the grandfather had enlisted the boy and his friends, given them the store key, and told them the safe combination. I remember the kid telling me he was disappointed. He had always thought the safe held his grandfather's stash of ancient pirate treasure. Upon grabbing the wooden board from the safe, however, the boys had run into two problems. Firstly, the board was hard as stone, and the best way to break the thing was turning into a point of argument now that the hammer had failed. The second issue was that woods in Chicago are scarce, and woods large enough for burying things miles apart from each other are even scarcer. Realizing it was most likely not the best idea to get in the way of a group of kids' family issues when a hammer and wooden slab are involved, I figured my best option was to break the thing myself to make sure the kids didn't get themselves hurt, then be on my way. This proved extremely difficult. I remember thinking that the board had to be reinforced with a steel plate or something. I was beating on the thing with the hammer for the 100th time when I remembered that I had a hacksaw I had bought to remove a broken tree limb 2 years earlier and had never touched it since. I told the kids to sit tight and jogged down the block to my apartment. By the time I got back, it was snowing and the boys were picking up the snow and throwing at each other in clumps rather than snowballs. It was an unusually mild winter for us last year, and I think this may have been the beginning of the only snowstorm we had all year, if I remember correctly. The 5 of them continued to play with the snow as I hacked into the board with my saw. It took an unusually long time, but it worked. When the first piece snapped off, I picked it up and saw that the grain where it had been cut was unlike anything I had ever seen before, spiraling in a very distinct pattern that I can still picture in my head. The unstained wood was a deep reddish brown. When the board was in 6 pieces, Peter, or Paul, grabbed the corner with the picture of the sun. Then he and one of his friends ran a short distance into a wooded area on the edge of the park and buried it about a foot down. As this was going on, the other boys explained to me that they were planning on spending the day riding the elevated train and taking the pieces to the various wooded areas they had come up with. They just needed one more place to bury the 6th piece, and hadn't come up with anything yet. As it happened to be Sunday, if I recall, I offered to do it on the way to work the next day, and they agreed that it was a good plan. As the 5 of them walked away toward the north, I saw them enter a station for the Blue Line train, and I never saw them again. Later that night, as the snowstorm started to get really bad, I remember thinking that I hoped I hadn't made a mistake by letting them go off on their own, but a strange adult hanging around with 5 neighborhood kids tends to give people the wrong idea, regardless of whether he's looking out for their safety. I hoped they had gotten their task finished before the storm had really hit. The white face in the window. Ouija piece. The corner of the board I had wound up with was the corner with the painting of the moon with the blank expression. I had really planned to bury it, I swear I did, but we all wound up snowed in the following morning, and it ended up in the drawer of an end table. I don't know if you've ever been snowed in during a Chicago winter, but when this happens, they tend to send out these huge, monolithic snowplows that push all of the snow into the mountains on top of all the parked cars, none of which will be capable of moving an inch for at least 2 days. The day was rather uneventful, but as nightfall approached, I was taken by the eerie notion that someone was watching me through my living room window. I kept glancing toward it, expecting to see someone peering in at me, despite the fact that I live on the 3rd floor and my living room window faces the street. After a while, I shook off the notion, and I believe I went to sleep around 11. Around 1 a.m., I was awoken by what sounded like a mechanical device humming loudly and assumed it to be my heater, possibly being overworked due to the snowstorm. I stood up and put my ear next to the vent, but the sound wasn't coming from there. I walked into the living room to check the settings on my thermostat, and immediately every hair on my body stood at full attention. The sound was coming from the direction of my living room window, and as I turned to look, I caught the ghastly image of a solid white face with a wide mouth and dark eye sockets on the other side of the glass. I quickly turned on a light and the face disappeared. the mechanical droning noise seemed to recede. The white face in the window. Noise. Had it all been my imagination, I wondered? When I was younger, I once had an episode of sleep paralysis where I witnessed a tree devouring my neighbor's dog through a bedroom window. But when I came out of it, the tree was back to normal, and the dog was perfectly fine. Had this been something similar? Nevertheless, I hardly slept the rest of the night. I kept thinking I was hearing that deep, mechanical drone somewhere in the distance. By the next night, I had regained my wits and fell asleep in my bed sometime around midnight. I awoke once again, terrified to the sound of the same mechanical drone as the previous night, but this time much louder. As I sat up in bed, I saw the ghastly white face with sunken eyes on the other side of the window near the foot of my bed, no more than 3 feet from where I lay sleeping. It had no neck, arms, torso, nothing. It seemed to just float there above the streetlights below, emanating that horrible humming sound. I instinctively grabbed the drapes and pulled them closed, but the sound continued. Remembering what had happened the night before, I ran to the lights and flipped the switch. The noise slowly faded, but I was too afraid to open the drapes for the rest of the night. The next morning, I was still unable to get to work due to my car being frozen beneath a 7-foot pile of ice, but I absolutely had to get out of that apartment. I thought that if the face was going to come back, that I would have to be ready for it. Somehow. I went to a sporting goods store in the neighborhood and purchased a box of ammo for the .22 range pistol I hadn't used in years. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. I also bought some caffeine tablets and a bag of coffee. Before nightfall, I set up camp in my living room with the pistol and a coffee pot, took one of the caffeine tablets, and rigged up a portable audio recorder that I sometimes use for work. I don't own a camera, and my cell phone's video function has not been working for months, so the best I could do was attempt to snap some photos in the dark with the cell if the face appeared again. It showed itself around 3 a.m. I was beginning to crash from all of the caffeine when I began to hear the droning sound approaching from the distance. I readied my gun in one hand and my cell phone in the other, but the face didn't appear at the window. I began to wonder if perhaps the face was outside my bedroom window, and as I snuck through the dark toward the door, the sound seemed to get louder. However, as I entered the room, the door slammed and locked behind me, and I heard glass shattering in the living room. Suddenly, the apartment was filled with the noises of things being smashed, thrown, and torn to pieces. The groaning noise was deafeningly loud, and I covered one ear and turned my head away as I clawed at the doorknob with my other hand, but it simply would not open. It was as if the lock had been welded shut. After about 30 seconds of this, I raised my foot and smashed the door open with 2 kicks. Immediately, the crashing in the living room stopped, but the room itself had been completely torn to pieces. And as I looked up above the debris at the shattered window, I saw the face one last time staring at me from the other side of my demolished Venetian blinds. It opened its mouth, exposing a wide, dark cavern, the likes of which I hope to never see again, and the horrible sound got louder and louder as I snapped a single photograph with my camera, and the flash went off. The white face in the window. Then, in an instant, the face was gone. All I have to prove my story is a single blurry photograph and the audio taken by my portable recorder in those last few minutes. But the thing about it that disturbed me the most is the corner of the wooden board with the painting of the moon. It was sitting atop the debris in the exact center of the room, and the face had been altered so that the expression was identical to what I had just seen in the window pane with the wide, gaping, cavernous mouth. I buried it in the woods the following morning.
Mattress yoked over his shoulders like a man condemned to bear it. Jack Stewart made his way up the final flight of stairs to the 5th floor of the Irving Gardens apartment building. From his pocket dangled the green key fob to his new studio. He dropped the mattress in front of the door. Apartment 514. and stuck the key in the corroded old doorknob. It was 5 p.m., a ray of dwindling sunlight cutting down the wall from the window at the end of the hallway. By dark, he should be completely moved in. It was only the bed, a handful of bags, and a celebratory case of bud. He dragged the mattress inside and dropped it in the corner where he figured he'd set up camp. The hollow thump of an empty room. The occasion seemed fused with a kind of sweet loneliness he both cherished and dreaded. For the first time ever, he was completely on his own. Solitude. Independence. 20 minutes later, he was ascending the stairs with the last of his bags slung over his shoulder. These, he dropped in a pile by the mattress and opened one to fish out his pillow. He dropped the pillow on the bed and lay down on his back. Looking around, he tried to familiarize himself with the cracks in the bowed plaster ceilings and walls. Warped woodwork. Painted over so heavily as to fill in the bevels. Somewhere under all that latex was certainly lead. Old transgressions. Buried forever. After a while, he got up and inspected the bathroom. It looked to have been upgraded sometime in the 70s. He scrutinized the corroded chrome fixtures and flaky grout between the floor tiles. He turned the toilet's flush lever, but nothing happened. Under the lid of the tank, he saw the chain connecting the lever and flapper had snapped. No luxury accommodations with the Irving Gardens apartments, but for $1 per square foot of personal space, it was surely a bargain. Whatever it took, he would make it livable. Jack went back to the main room, took a beer out of the case and popped the top. He began unpacking his things. His only furniture was a table, 2 chairs, and a dresser. He tucked his shirts and pants into the bottom drawers and his socks and underwear on top. There was a closet between the front door and the bathroom with a dressing mirror hung on the door. He took his coat to the closet, hoping the previous tenant had left him a hanger or two. When he opened it, though, he found more than just a hanger. There was a suit hanging inside, a black jacket and matching pants. That's interesting. He unhooked the suit and brought it out to have a look. He was no expert on formal wear, but he thought the suit looked pretty nice, if not a little out of style. Fine-looking fabric, whatever it was. He checked for the make, but there were no labels in either the collar or the pants. Feeling faintly silly, he brought the jacket to his face and sniffed. It looked brand new, but was still a little musty from closet time. Must have been in there for quite a while. Jack hung the suit back up, folded his own jacket, and tucked it up on the top shelf. He fished the business card out of his pocket, the one Al gave him, along with his room key earlier in the day. Al was the superintendent, an ex-prizefighter and lifelong handyman in his 70s. He'd been living and maintaining this building for 40 years. There was a good chance he'd laid down a lot of that lead paint himself. He'd lost his wife 35 years ago, he'd said, and lived here alone ever since. He must know who the suit belonged to. It was also a good excuse to summon him about the minor toilet problem. Jack leaned against the closet door and dialed Al's number. "This is Al." It's Jack. The guy in 514? "Aye. Let me guess. The toilet." Jack chuckled. "So you already know about it. Well, I got to get to the hardware store. I was gonna quick fix it with a pull chain for the closet light, but I thought better of it." "Hey, speaking of the closet, what's the story with the suit in there? Do you know?" "Right, aye. The suit. Forgot to tell you about that." After a little weird pause, Al cleared his throat. "Just leave it be, if it's all the same to you." "Whose is it?" "Well, it isn't exactly anybody's. Just think it's part of the apartment. You know what I mean?" "Like part of the apartment's history?" Another pause, this one a bit longer. "Kinda like that. If you could just leave it be, I'd appreciate it. You don't bother it, and it won't bother you. Satisfied?" He was anything but satisfied. Al's response had only made him curious, but the conversation was getting uncomfortable, so he decided to let it go. "Fair enough," Jack said. "Thanks, buddy. I'll get to the store tomorrow. Probably pick up a bunch of them chains. Seems like everyone's a rusting up. Hard water and all that, you know? Ha!" "Gotcha," Jack said. "Thanks, Al." Jack hung up. He polished off the beer and uncapped a second. Nothing like a few drinks to make you feel more at home, even in a 100-year-old studio with a mysterious suit in the closet. A suit that wouldn't bother him if he didn't bother it. What a mysterious thing to say about a suit. A few beers later, and he was hooking up his VCR to the TV. A box set of Columbo episodes to continue the evening's mystery theme. He unpacked his toiletries, showered, and brushed his teeth. He piled his luggage to make an impromptu sofa and settled in to watch TV. By his side, the empty beer bottles accumulated. 3, 4, 6, 8. The sweet sense of loneliness, turning only to sweet. 3 episodes into the first season of Columbo, Jack was snoring soundly into a pile of linens. Jack woke sometime in the night with an odd sense of foreboding. It was quiet in the city streets below. Yellow arc sodium lamplight cast a strange, long shadow across the floor and onto the wall. He turned his head. He froze. There, in front of the window, stood the form of a headless man. It took him a moment to recognize what he was looking at. It was the suit. The weird old suit from the closet. Standing there like someone was wearing it. Like it was looking out the window. Am I dreaming? Hallucinating? He watched silently, both he and the suit unmoving. Had to be a dream. A drunken, exhausted dream brought on by his uneasiness in the new apartment. But no, he was wide awake. That left hallucinating. Was he a schizo all of a sudden? Should he add that to his list of problems? Or was it a ghost? There's no fucking way, he said. Seizing on a moment of courage, he rolled out of bed and made for the suit. Whether he meant to grab it or tackle it, he didn't even know. He was 21 years old and he wasn't going to be spooked like a little kid just because he was alone in a new place. He dashed for it. But by the time he got to the window, the suit was lying on the floor, its ghostly contents apparently emptied. He just stood there for a minute, half relieved, half confused, looking down at the crumpled heap. He checked his watch. 3:15 a.m. Don't bother the suit, and it won't bother you, huh? Jack didn't know what the hell had just happened, but this much he did know. The suit bothered him. Jack gathered it up, holding it like something soiled. He opened the door and walked down the hall and stuffed the suit into the trash chute. He shut the door and went back to the apartment and washed his hands in the sink. Feeling silly for doing so, he examined the room for any ghostly ephemera he might have missed. Satisfied, he took one more beer from the case and stood drinking it by the window. He looked outside, saw the dark silhouette of the meat plant on the edge of town, the blinking radio tower, the old billboard overlooking the highway near the police outpost. What the hell had just happened? He set the empty beer bottle on the windowsill and went back to bed. Eventually, he fell asleep. When Jack woke up, the sun was strong in the window. His head throbbed. He checked his watch. 11:30 a.m. It was a minute before last night's episode came to mind. The whole thing felt like a drunken fever dream. How drunk had he been anyway? Turning to look, he counted the empty beer bottles arranged like bowling pins next to the mattress. All right, so I must have been pretty drunk. Jack peeled himself off the mattress and went to the closet and opened it. There was the suit, hanging where he left it yesterday. Just as he thought. The whole thing had been a drunken dream. In the wake of it, though, the suit still gave him the creeps. What was it about that thing? Jack showered and dressed and emerged on city streets in search of a strong cup of coffee. At the local coffee shop around the corner, he saw a familiar face behind a newspaper. It was Al, the super. "Hey, Al," Jack said. Al looked up from his paper. "Hey, buddy. I'll be there later to fix the flapper. Everything else okay so far?" "Slept pretty bad my first night, but I guess that's to be expected." "Ah, me too," Al said. "Got woke up round 3:15 by someone slamming the trash chute. Why on earth Someone need to take out the trash at 3 in the morning. It's a mystery to me. Wasn't you then, were it, buddy? No, Jack said. Not me. My apartment's right under there. Work the trash chute that late and you're sure to wake me up. Something to keep in mind. I'll keep it in mind. Good, Al said. As for the toilet, just give me an hour or two. That's fine, Jack said. Al returned to his paper and Jack sat at the bar and ordered coffee. He gazed down at the sports section a previous diner had left behind, but he wasn't reading. He was replaying last night's dream in his mind, wherein he actually had used the trash chute at 3:15 a.m. One hell of a coincidence, sure. But that's all it could have been, right? First of all, suits don't just walk out of closets and stand by windows. Second of all, it was right there in the closet. Coincidences happen, Jack thought. A couple of hours later, Jack was unpacking the last of his things. There was a knock on the door, and Jack answered it to find Al holding a section of beaded chain and tin snips. Thanks for coming by, Jack said. That's a quick fix, buddy. I'll be right out your way. Sure thing. Al slowed as he walked by the closet door on the way to the bathroom. He appeared to want to look inside, but stopped himself. The two of them met eyes. So, you saw the suit, Al said. Of course he had, they'd already discussed it. Why so mysterious about it, if you don't mind me asking? Al gestured as though to brush it off. Nah, nothing mysterious, he said. Like I said, buddy, you just leave it be. But why? Al went to the bathroom and lifted the lid off of the toilet tank. Was he trying to ignore him? Jack wouldn't have it. He opened the closet and unhooked the suit. Displaying it like a haberdasher, he carried it to the bathroom and cleared his throat so Al would look. He did, with eyes suddenly wide. What are you doing with that? He asked. Didn't I tell you to leave it be? I don't see the harm in it. Tell me what you know about it. Why not just leave it be? Why are you so insistent that I leave it alone? Is there something about this thing I should know? Al sighed. It was pretty clear Jack wasn't letting this go. Look, I don't want to freak you out, buddy. It's a strange thing at all. You're not gonna freak me out, Jack said. I am not a kid. I just want to know what the big deal is. Al set down the tin snips and held up his hands in supplication. Fine, he said. Do you want to know, buddy? I'll tell ya. Creakily, the old man sat down on the edge of the bathtub. He regarded the suit in Jack's hands as something fundamentally offensive. It's been here as long as I have, he said. Everyone who ever lived in this room wanted to get rid of it. They'd leave it by the door, throw it out with the trash, whatever. But every time, it'd end up right back in the closet, all by itself. Don't no one knows the hows or whys of it. Jack paused. That's impossible. D'you think? Al said. But it's the truth. That's why I told you to leave it alone. Save you the trouble of getting spooked when you do the same thing. It's hard enough getting tenants in the old place, and once they get spooked, they all would run out on me. Jack searched Al's face for signs he was joking, but there were none. He glanced at the suit in his arms, then at the window where he'd imagined it standing in a dream. Then, for the first time, he noticed the empty beer bottle sitting on the windowsill. The one he'd put there before going back to bed. I can't believe it. It really happened. Al seemed to pick up on Jack's inner monologue. You already tried getting rid of it, didn't you? Jack looked back at Al. After a pause, he said, It was me at the trash chute last night. Al let out a little chuckle, shook his head. People tend to be afraid of what they don't understand. But there's no need to be afraid. That suit belongs in the closet. All he got to do is leave it there. I guess it just kind of gave me the creeps, Jack said. Oh, I hear you, buddy boy. But the last thing either of us needs to be thinking about is an old suit. So, why don't you just hang it back up, and we'll both put it out of our minds, eh? From now on, just think of it as part of the woodwork. Fair enough. Jack nodded. He returned to the closet and hung the suit back on the rod. It seemed to watch him as he closed the door. Part of the woodwork, he reminded himself. Al fixed the toilet and repositioned the lid. They shook hands and Al left. With that, Jack returned to unpacking. He put on the bedclothes, finished setting up his entertainment center, and unpacked the rest of his toiletries. The suit crept into his mind from time to time, but he forced the thoughts away. Just part of the woodwork. Don't bother the suit, and the suit won't bother you. Jack woke in the night to freezing cold. The drapes around the window were billowing in the wind. Had he left it open last night? It was freezing outside. Why would he have opened it in the first place? He threw the covers off, but stopped in his tracks. It was the suit again. It was standing by the side of the bed, not facing the window. This time, it was facing him. I'm not drunk. I'm not dreaming. I am not hallucinating. So what now? What do you want from me? He whispered. At first, nothing happened. But then, a kind of airy relaxation seemed to come over the suit, almost like it responded to his voice. What do you want? He asked again. It felt awkward, talking to something he didn't quite believe himself, but again, the suit appeared to respond. The shoulders slumped a bit. The cuffs ruffled. Is there something you want from me? The suit relaxed even more now. Where it had been mannequin stiff a minute ago, it now seemed outsized on something smaller. Gently, it began to drift. The arms folded inward. The pants folded lengthwise, then bent at the knees. While Jack sat trembling, the suit folded neatly, all by itself. Then it drifted slowly onto his lap. Jack didn't move. Moments later, the window began to close, the curtain relaxing on their rods. After that, everything was still. Jack checked his watch. It was 3:21 a.m. Jack looked down at the suit, unsure what to do next. The way it had presented itself to him seemed more like a gift than a threat. Was that what it wanted? This ghost, spirit, whatever, to give him the suit? Or was he supposed to do something with it? Put it on? The suit was roughly his size. But what would happen if he put on a haunted outfit? Still, he felt distinctly that this was what it wanted him to do. But why? Should I call Al? He checked his watch again. Bad idea. But there was surely no getting back to sleep tonight. He carried the suit to the table and popped the cap off a beer and sat drinking. He kept an eye around the room for more ghostly evidence, but it was just him in the suit. A few beers later, his nerves were suitably settled. He stared at the suit, wondering what to do. All right, he said to the empty room, although he knew it wasn't truly empty. With the subtle sensation of being watched, he dropped his shorts. He unbuttoned the pants and slipped them on. He stood and looked down at them. They fit just right, even without a belt. Then he took the jacket, slipped it on, and buttoned it up. He looked in the dressing mirror. Not bad, he thought. So, what now? He waited for a minute, but nothing happened. Stillness in the room. Nothing ghostly, nothing revelatory. Starting to unbutton the jacket, he glanced back in the mirror. Well, that's weird. The reflection in the mirror was somehow brighter than the room itself. In the window behind him, the setting sun cast an orange glow. He turned around, but the night was black as ever. Back in the mirror, it looked more like late evening. So vain, Charlie. When he turned again, the whole room looked like it did in the mirror. There was a woman there, an attractive brunette in an evening gown. She looked set to go out in the town. So did he realized. "I'm so happy you came, darling." The woman embraced him, a soft waft of perfume. He embraced her back, but not of his own doing. He realized he wasn't in control. And the room, he noticed, was nothing like it had been. It looked newer, bright and clean, wallpaper in place of the old drab paint, gaudy carpeting over the wide wooden planks. "No one happier than me, Doris. I'm the luckiest man alive tonight." The words came out in an unfamiliar voice. It wasn't he who had spoken them. He was inside this man, this Charlie, wearing the same suit. He was just going along for the ride. "You just might be," she said. She kissed him. He kissed her back, deeply and passionately. He felt everything. He just wasn't doing it. "How long do we have?" Charlie asked. "I want to cherish every moment. The bastard won't be back until Saturday. I want you with me every moment until then. If he hits you again, Doris, even once, the minute the insurance money comes in, I'll divorce the bastard. Then, you'll have me all to yourself. No more sneaking around ever again." "I can't stand how he hurts you. How could anyone hurt you?" She caressed his face. "It won't be long, darling. I promise." Suddenly, there was a ruckus out in the hallway. Both she and Charlie turned their heads. When their eyes met again, there was terror in Doris's face. "No," she said. The door crashed open. There was a man in the doorway, a brawny, mustachioed brute in slacks and an undershirt, a little drool in the corner of his mouth. A familiar face, just much, much younger. It was Al. "I knew it," he growled. "Al," Doris said. "It's not what it looks like." He rushed her. Charlie got between them, and Al caught him on the chin with a vicious punch. Jack felt every bit of it. Felt his knees go weak, heard his ears ringing. "You're drunk, Al!" "Shut up, you cheating tramp! Whore!" Al's meaty palm connected with Doris's face with a sound like a thunderclap. Something wet splattered Charlie's face, and he knew immediately it was blood. Doris collapsed bonelessly on the carpet. "And you there, buddy boy." Charlie got his bearings and threw a punch of his own. Al ducked it. He countered with a hook to the ribs, then a brutal cross to the side of his head. Charlie's face hit the floor, and the world went dark. Jack woke up to muffled sobs. "Whore. Filthy whore." He turned his head. Doris was prone, her face buried in the carpet, her dress torn off and thrown aside. Al on top of her, his pants around his knees, his forearm on the back of her neck. "Get off of her," Charlie groaned. "Aye, if it ain't Sleeping Beauty. Oh, I'll be getting off your little girlfriend soon as I'm done with her." Charlie struggled, but he couldn't move. His wrists and ankles were bound with torn strips of Doris's dress. "You son of a bitch! You'll never get away with this!" Al only humped more furiously, grinding his forearm harder into the back of Doris's neck. A few last thrusts, and he ceased his assault. He pushed himself off her and got to his feet and buckled his pants. Then he wound up a foot and kicked her hard in the side. "Get away with what now?" Al asked. "Making love to my own wife. I haven't even gotten started with you yet, buddy. Just leave her alone. Please, Al." Grinning, Al walked to the kitchen area. From a drawer, he extracted a large rolling pin. He weighed it in his hand, gripped it by a handle, and swung it like a bat. Jack's heart and Charlie's heart were one, racing in his chest. Oh, I'll leave the both of you alone. Don't you worry about it, buddy. Alone in a goddamn hole. Please, Al. Don't do anything you're going to regret. Regret? He turned to look at his wife, battered and bleeding on the carpet. Thinks she regretted all the running around she's been doing. Not until tonight she didn't. I'll bet she regrets it now, though. Don't you think? Buddy boy. I know what you do to her, Charlie said. I see the cuts, the bruises. How can you blame her for trying to get away from you? She's my property! Al brought the rolling pin down in the middle of her back with a sickening thump. Doris screamed. The blow seemed to leave an artificial arch where there wasn't one before. Stop, Al! He brought it down again, this time on her right shoulder, then again on her left. With each blow, her body was thrown into unnatural contortions. The final blow, the hardest of them all, sunk into the back of her head. Their marriage, along with her agonies, promptly brought to a close. Oh, God. Oh, God, Doris. Al straightened up, his eyes full of blue insanity. He turned his attention to Charlie. Till death do us part. Right, buddy? Guess that about does it. You murdered her. Oh, you got it all wrong there, buddy. You murdered her. You killed the bitch when you decided to mess with another man's property. And look at what you got yourself into. Now you've gone and killed yourself, too. Charlie didn't even have time to protest. The rolling pin landed on his back, vertebrae crushed. Again on his ribs. Again on his shoulder. His knees. His elbows. Jack being pummeled. Crushed. Only when the final blow came was he delivered from the agony. He saw white, then red, then black. When he woke again, the pain was gone. He was in the trunk of a moving car, a muffled tune playing over the radio. He smelled excrement, blood. He felt the car turn, then the rumble of gravel underneath. Soon, it came to a stop. Momentarily, the trunk creaked open. A clear night sky, and Al's wild eyes. Enjoy the ride, buddy boy? Charlie didn't answer. He couldn't answer. Jack knew why. Charlie was dead. Jack was alive inside of him. But Charlie was dead. So was Doris. Al seized him by the lapels of his jacket and dragged him out of the trunk, dumped him on the ground. He landed face up. He could make out the car by the back of it. An early '60s Chevy Impala. Al pulled out Doris and dumped her next to him. He just stood there a minute, chest heaving, looking crazily about. He wiped his forehead with the back of his sleeve. Ladies first. You don't mind, do you, buddy boy? Al stepped out of Jack's field of vision. He heard Doris's body dragging through the gravel. Dragging. Quieter. Gone. When Al came back, the moon was high in the sky. Sorry to keep you waiting, buddy boy. How Jack wanted to answer him. He'd never felt so helpless. Not once in his life. Al lifted his legs and started to drag him. Charlie's head lolled, giving him a different view of his surroundings. Behind the trees to the left, he thought he recognized something. The bulletin board. I think I know where we are. As Al dragged him further along, he tried to picture from the perspective of his apartment window where they might be headed. The bulletin board was near the edge of town. The old meat plant was far off to the left. Meanwhile, they were going into the woods. Charlie's head hit something in the ground and turned to the right, giving Jack a different view. Now he could see the blinking red light of the radio tower. The radio tower off to the right. The small patch of woods. It must be. A glimpse of the picnic area confirmed it. Gilbert Park. Ah, you should have brought your bait and trunks, buddy boy. Shame about that nice suit. Gilbert Lake. He killed his wife, killed this guy, and dumped them in Gilbert Lake. 35 years ago. And the suit. It's Charlie. He's been trying to tell me what happened. Trying to... With the revelation, Jack felt himself slipping away. The last things he heard were the gentle lapping of water against the bank. Heavy chains on the floor of the boat. Some muffled swear. Followed by a comment on Doris's weight. But from all to follow, he'd be spared. He found himself back in front of the mirror in his dark and dingy apartment. Present day. He unbuttoned the jacket, slipped out of it, let the pants drop to the floor. He turned from the mirror, looked at the spot on the floor where 35 years ago Doris and Charlie were murdered. He could still see Al on top of Doris, raping her, beating her to death before his own eyes. Even worse, he could still feel the rolling pin crashing into his own back, his own ribs, his own skull. By proxy, Al had killed him too, and he'd gotten away with all of it. Gritting his teeth, Jack picked up the phone and started calling the police. But he stopped. What would he tell them? How could he prove it? There were 2 bodies in Gilbert Lake. There was no doubt in Jack's mind, but buried in 35 years of silt and sediment. Meanwhile, if he told the cops the truth, they'd throw him in the loony bin. So, what was he supposed to do? He checked his watch. 3:30 a.m. The whole thing had taken only minutes. He had truly been transported to another time. All the while, the murderer was sleeping soundly downstairs without a care in the world. Sleeping soundly. Having not only murdered Doris and Charlie, but also murdered him. Fuck this! Enraged, Jack stormed out into the hall, went to the trash chute, and began slamming the door. Bang, bang, bang. He slammed the door over and over, slammed it until he heard the footsteps in the stairwell, kept slamming until he saw the murderer's silhouette in the moonlit window at the end of the hallway. Jack, are you out of your mind? I know what you did, Jack said, leveling a finger at the man. What are you talking about? Jack took a few steps toward him. You beat them to death. You dumped them in the lake! By now, a couple of other tenants were standing in their doorways. It appeared none of them dared to interfere. Charlie and Doris, Jack went on. I know everything. I felt everything. The rolling pin, the Chevy Impala. I know where the bodies are, Al. The jig is up. Al's chest was rising and falling rapidly. His face, though, had turned from despondent to defeated. The suit, huh? Charlie's suit, Jack said. It showed me everything. A pause. The tenants stood wide eyes in their doorways. Al looked down. Well, I'll be damned, he said. I should have known that bastard could do more than just reappear. Hell, I'd have kept that room myself if I knew it. Damn suit just gave me the creeps. How could you have done that? You murdered them, Al. You got no idea what you put me through, Jack. The cheating, the running around. I was just so angry. You beat her, Jack said. You beat her. You raped her. And you killed her. And I can prove it. It's over, buddy boy. Al was pacing the end of the hallway. You know, after 35 years, you'd think you're pretty much home free. He chuckled ironically. But a fella my age ain't exactly fit for prison. Another door opened then. At least 5 sets of eyes on Al now. Jack was grateful for them, in case the desperate old man decided to try something. Didn't complain though, Al continued. I had a good run while it lasted. There's just one more thing you need to know. Something I'm sure old Charlie didn't tell you. What's that? Asked Jack. Toilet chains are on my desk. You help yourself. With that, the old man turned and ran for the window. Stop! Shouted Jack. But it was too late. He crashed through the glass head first. When Jack reached the window, he saw the broken, writhing figure 5 floors below. Blood gathering in a pool around him. His arms and legs broken and bent at odd angles. He remembered the way Doris had looked after he'd beaten her. 35 years it took. But Al had proved Charlie right. In the end, he would regret it. It took Al 2 hours to die, but die he did. With no family or relatives to vouch for him, his body ended up in a cemetery for the unclaimed. Old transgressions buried forever. All set up in the apartment now, Jack popped a beer and sat on the couch. The suit was hanging back in the closet where it belonged. He could get rid of it if he wanted to, he knew. With Charlie's soul at rest, there'd be no reason for it to come back again. It was all right, though. The suit no longer gave him the creeps. No more walking around the apartment at night, bedside visits, etc. He'd even had it cleaned. History aside, after all, it was a pretty nice suit. Some suits just beg to be worn, Jack thought.
Chilling tales for dark nights.